Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about the four knights variation, and to be more precise, we're going to talk Scotch game four knights. And it's starting with a move e4. White is playing with a king's pawn towards the center, immediately taking control of the center. We are replying also with identical move. Now knight f3 is targeting the pawn on e5 while we are defending the pawn on e5. And after knight c3, we are heading into this variation. So in this position, there are quite some moves for black, for example, bishop c5 or bishop b4, bishop e7, g6, and of course, knight f6. We were trying to make some of these moves work, but unfortunately, it's not really working. For example, bishop b5 would just got into the knight d5. Yeah, also bishop e7 would be pretty passive after d5, as well as g6. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not really working out. And that's why knight f6 seems like the best move in this position. We're just we're putting pressure on the pawn on e4 first of all, and also we're supporting at some moment the push of d5. And basically, there is no other better option which black could have in this position. So basically, here we're going to start with a d4, which where we are kind of arriving at the four knights Scotch game, where we have all knights. That's why it's called four knights, because we have all four knights out, and Scotch because white is breaking in the center immediately with a d4 move. So the main idea of this is pretty similar to just normal Scotch game, is to have, first of all, advantage in the center due to the pawn on e4. Because here we have to take on d4, it's kind of a standard move. And bishop b4 would be also possible in this position, but e takes d4 is concrete. So we're taking the pawn on d4, and that way we also transpose from some lines from the Scotch game, we could transpose here. So knight takes, and now we're seeing this advantage of white, so to say, that white has more space in the center due to the pawn on e4, but knight moved twice already from g1 to f3 and from f3 to g4. So that's why this piece is a bit maybe not the best, because it can be always attacked. Well, and in this position already, where we're arriving now, there are quite some moves for black to go. Well, we were looking at many moves, and there have been some issues with some of them. So the main move, which is played, it's a Spanish variation of the four knights Scotch game. It's bishop b4, and it's a very decent option. But there is one issue we're going also to see later in the game. We could transpose there. So after bishop b4, after knight c6, bc, bishop d3, d5, this is the normal position, e d5, castle, castle. We are reaching this position, which is very solid for white. And yeah, we can say kind of boring, this position. And this line is very theoretical and everyone knows it. And it's very difficult to fight with black for some advantage or for the win. So it's very, very equalish. Also considering the fact that our pawn structure is maybe slightly worse. Okay, we have a pawn in the center, that's a good thing, but other than that, we have three pawn islands, so it could be a bit of a disadvantage. So we wanted to avoid these lines in this Spanish variation. So that's why we came up with another move, and we tried to make it work, and we made it work, which is bishop c5. So bishop c5 looks like similar approach to what we did in the Scotch game d4, going for attack on the knight. But here the position is, of course, a bit different due to inclusion of the other knights, knight on c3 and knight on f6. So we're going to see why, what is new. Okay, first of all, because there is always some bishop g5 option. And yeah, for us, there is another option we're going to see just in a moment. So okay, main idea of this move is targeting the knight and see what white is going to do. So there are quite some moves here with the knight. The knight could go absolutely anywhere. So in this position, let me just remove this arrow. So in this position, knight has to move or knight has to be defended. So the first move is knight takes on c6. There is another move, knight f5. There is a move of knight coming to f3. And there is a move bishop e3. Do I miss something? There is of course, there is knight b3, targeting the bishop similar to the line which we have in the Scotch game. Bishop knight b3 variation. So yeah, I think that's it. All the moves we have, and we're going to start with the most dubious one is knight f3. First of all, I would like you to stop the video here and try to find the best move for black. So we can see that bringing the knight out, taking the pawn and coming back shouldn't be the best approach. And that's why it's being punished pretty early on with the move knight g4. Immediately targeting the pawn on f2, and it's pretty difficult to defend it, so we can say that we in just 6 moves we're already winning, because after bishop e3 we're taking the pawn, we're up a pawn, we have a bishop pair, and we're getting winning position. So knight f5 is another option here. Let me just first of all remove. Okay, we looked at this. So knight f5 is another option. So with the threat of taking on g7, it feels like knight is very, very good here, also controlling some dark squares. But it's pretty dubious because we can just easily protect the pawn on d7 by castling, and knight just going to be exposed and not bring much on f5. So we castle, of course, we defend the pawn on g7, there is no issue. So now there are, of course, a question how to continue the development for white. In case of bishop d3, we have d5 immediately breaking the center at the same time, using the fact that the knight is staying awkward on the f5 square. In case of pawn takes on d5, we are taking the knight, bishop takes, and after rook e8, we're going to ask white what are they going to do, how are they going to stop the check, because there are no real good reply there, and we're going to put more and more pressure on the king's position, and most likely we'll have an attack. Clearly better position for black. In case of the castle here immediately, then we take on f5, pawn takes, and now after knight e5 we are reaching position where we have 4 against 3, and for the endgame it's going to be pretty much crucial, because this 4 against 3 are going to be very difficult to push forward to create a passer, while we will have more chances. So due to the pawn structure, we have a clear edge in this position. So that was a bishop d3. In case of bishop coming to c4, then we can again go with a similar way with a d5, because in this case we even attack the bishop on c4 and we attack the knight on f5. So bishop takes, we take on f5, bishop takes on c6, we take, queen d8, trade of the queen happens, and then we're just bringing out the rook. All our pieces are being pretty much active. King goes to f1, we jump with the knight to e4, bishop e3, and after trade of the couple of minor pieces, we're getting completely winning position due to the activity of our rooks. We're going to grab the pawn on e3, or we're going to eat the pawns on the queen side. So winning position, winning endgame for black. In case of bishop e3, which may seem logical, trying to first of all also defend in the future on f2, and also if we're taking on e3, of course that we don't want to do. We don't want to help white for them to bring the knight to e3, because if we take on e3, knight would be staying on the perfect square. So that's why white we have to play something else, and we are going here for bishop b4, very strong move. We're going to see this move also later. Spoiler, spoiler alert. So bishop b4. At the same time, also we're challenging the e4 pawn. So now white has to do something about it. In case bishop defends on d3, there is again the d5 option, breaking the center at the same time, opening the bishop, targeting the knight on f5. And in case e d5, we have queen d5, because in this position, knight is blocking the way of the bishop to take on h7. And even if it would be possible, the queen is defended on d5. And of course, knight cannot take on d5 because of the pin. So we have a winning position here as black. In case of knight g3, which would be logical defending the pawn, but now we can kind of point out that the knight went all the way from g1 to d3, which is probably not the ideal square for the knight. So here we're just going for d5. We finish the development. We are already clearly better here. So bishop g5 looks like the most logical move here because we're developing the bishop, pinning the knight at the same time. But here we have, again, the same medicine against many of these moves, especially with knight on f5, it's d5. Feels like bishop is stopping the d5 idea, but actually it's happening, it's working out. Because let's see, if white is taken, let's start with a pawn, then of course bishop takes a5, dc, taking another knight, queen e8 check, bishop e2, and now queen c6. Basically now we're getting into symmetrical pawn structure. We don't have weaknesses, white doesn't have weaknesses, but looking at the development, we can say definitely that black is clearly better, ready to bring the rooks to the open files d and e. So if bishop takes on f6 and we take the bishop, knight e5, then queen b2. And basically we're just going to win this game on the dark squares. The dark squares are super weak for white. We finish the development castled with the king, and white will have some issues to find a square for the king to hide. If knight takes on d5, then we take on f5 first. If white is going for intermediate check, we take it, trading the queens, bishop f6, attacking the rook, but here after rook d6 we're targeting the bishop and we're going to end up a piece. Bishop takes f6 is also possible, but after take on e5. But basically it would be very nice for white to play 2 moves in a row here to finish the development, but they cannot. So after rook e8, in case of bishop e2, I would like for you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. I hope you found it. I don't think it's so difficult, but it's a very nice move. Rook takes e2. Queen cannot take on e2 because the knight is hanging on d5. And if king takes on e2, then after knight d4, king f1, we're just grabbing the knight. If c3, white is trying to use the pin, we have an intermezzo check on c4 and we're completely winning. So knight e3 coming back, trying to defend poor king on e1. Then we're taking it after trade of the queens on d8. We are pretty much happy. Knight b4, we have an intermezzo attacking the c2 pawn. Bishop d3 trying to defend, but after knight e3, pawn d3, we're taking on e3 with a check. And the next move, we're grabbing the pawn on d3. We are already equalize the material right now, but we are threatening to play rook d2 and eat some pawns on the queen side, as well as maybe on the king side. So that was a knight f5, which doesn't really bring so much sense. So now we're going into the other waters. We're going to see what happens after knight b3, which looks kind of close to what we have in the chapter of the Scotch game, knight b3. Because here we're going with the bishop away. But since the knight is on c3, then we don't go bishop away to b6, but we go to b4 using the fact that the knight is there, and we're pinning the knight. So kind of saying that we transpose to the Spanish variation without playing one move. So we have the same position, but the knight is not on d4, but on b3. And to be honest, it's actually an achievement, because what we threaten to take a pawn on e4 right now, and there is no idea for white to grab our knight on c6. since knight is already on b3. So that's already an achievement here in this line. So if bishop goes to g5, trying to pin us, which looks logical, h6, almost always when the bishop is on g5, we're going to try first to ask bishop where does it want to go, what does it want to do, bishop h4, and here we can immediately strike with a g5 move, since we haven't castled yet, since the king is not committed to castling. Bishop g3 going all the way back, and now knight e4. Since we also win a pawn on e4, we can weaken a little bit the king side. If bishop d2 trying to block the spin, then we are castling bishop d3, rook e8, putting pressure here, threatening to take on c3. f3, white is trying to defend, but after d5, we're putting enormous amount of pressure. So castle, and here we have knight e5, very nice move. Attacking the bishop on d3, we have a very nice center. We have a pawn on d5, which is challenging the pawn on e4. So yeah, we have enormous attack here ongoing. In the center, our pieces are much more active, and I would say the position is much more comfortable. For that, there is at least slight edge for black. Bishop d3 looks like a decent option. Since the knight is not on d4, it cannot be taken now, so knight is on b3, so bishop d3 trying to defend the pawn and castle as fast as possible. And here we go for a5. This move reminds also the positions which we get in the Scotch game knight b3, but our bishop is located on b6. The main idea of this move is to create a threat of a4. And to see if white wants to stop it or not. In case white is stopping it, then we're going to have some perks later. So, by the way, this, yes, what I forgot to mention, that this a5 move is not something new. It was already played by another Ukrainian, Grandmaster Romanician. So we're going to follow a bit the game which happened, and he played their a5. So in case of a4, stopping the a4 move, then we're going for d5 now. Inclusion of a5 f4 is better because we have better control over b4 square. In case of the castle, bishop g4, attacking the queen and provoking the f3. So in case of bishop e2 coming back with the bishop, we're trading, and after taking on e4, knight e4, knight e4, queen e4, we have queen e7, and basically we already equalize the position. It's very equal. I mean, of course, it's like drawish, but there is still play. I mean, you will be able to play. Both sides will still have chances, but everything is pretty much solid. In case of f3 here, which would weaken and try to like keep some imbalances, we go back to e6, and f3 is going to weaken the dark squares. It weakens this diagonal a lot, so later we can also consider putting the bishop there if we can. So bishop g5 trying to pin the knight on f6, so we have to take on e4. Bishop takes, trade happens, bishop c6 with a check intermezzo. Yes, and here actually it looks like if we're taking on c6, we can get into the worst endgame, but we have a very nice queen d7 move in this position, and now basically after take, we're getting absolutely symmetrical position with a bishop pair. So okay, in a couple of moves, of course, white is taking the pawn, we are grabbing another pawn, we have a bishop pair. The computer would say it's around equal, but I'm saying that we for sure should have an advantage, material advantage, due to the bishop pair. The center is open for that. Bishops should be very good pieces in this endgame. So e takes d5 is another option. And yeah, e takes d5 happens, so we got to react, we got to take, knight d5, castle, and now we have to take on c3 because, I mean, otherwise knight d5 is a threat and bishop h7 is going to win a queen. So we have to play knight c3. Here, queen e1, intermediate check makes a lot of sense, trying to keep equality, because if white is taking on c3, of course, we are much better. So bishop e7 coming back with a bishop, queen c3, and after castle we are ready to bring our bishop to f6 to control the long diagonal from a3 to a1, and we have a b4 square disadvantage which we achieved by playing a4 and a5 and a4. So that was an a4 move. We looked at everything. So now we're going into a3 territory. a3 is forcing us to take on c3, and we're not against it. We go for it. Bishop takes c3, bc. We could have taken also on c3 immediately, but inclusion of a5, a4, it's of course advantage for us. Because after castle, we play d5. And after all the trades that happened, there is no more the bishop coming to a3 any longer. So pawn is stopping that idea. At the same time, we have ideas of pushing a4, targeting the knight on b3. And we have, of course, some developing move like bishop f5 in the position. So this inclusion of a5, a4, a3 makes a lot of sense for black. And well, there are some pawn weaknesses. Of course, white has a bishop here, so position should be around equal since white should compensate the pawn structure with the bishop pair. So castle is another move, not reacting at all. But if white is not reacting at all, a4 can be played, and this is what happened in the game as well. It was in the game of Areshenko against Romanishin. So a4 attacking the knight. Knight has to go to a passive square. We are chasing it away. Castling, and now basically, actually, yes, castle is an improvement over the game. Because in the game, bishop took on c3 right away. We want to take it, but we want to keep an option so far, so castle is a better option here. So knight f3, white is relocating the knight, but again, like looking at this knight, which journey it had, bringing to b3, coming back to d2. So many tempos were spent, like 4 moves were spent for nothing. h6, we're stopping the idea of bishop g5 because now this move is possible. If we can spend time on this, playing h6 makes a lot of sense to try to make a prophylaxis against the bishop coming to g5. e5, of course, with this move, since we didn't play d6, we allowed e5, but yeah, this is like the critical question from white, which we should reply. But here we have knight g4, targeting the pawn with both knight. Very, very important that we can do it and also do it with the tempo. In case of queen e2, which is defending the pawn on e5, we can go with the d6 now, because after queen e4, which would be normally a double attack if we have a pawn on d6, queen e4 would be, I mean, it's not really a double attack, but it would attack the knight for sure, and we would have issues. So we have d6. Actually, it is double attack, sorry. It's also threatening a checkmate on h7. So after d6, queen e4, we have a very nice move, f5. And if white is taking en passant, we are bringing the knight to f6, defending and attacking at the same time, attacking the queen and defending the square on h7. E takes f6, pawn takes, queen g6. And now we're going queen e8, offering a trade of the queens. Probably white will have to trade queens, but in the endgame, we're getting this endgame, we're going to have 4 against 3 on the queen side, and it feels like that the one side which can fight for the win is for sure black. Knight d5 is another option, attacking the bishop, removing the knight from the opportunity of taking on c3. And here we can go d6. We can give up the bishop pair to white, but in return for that, we're going to eliminate everything what's happening in the center. So after knight b4, ed6, queen d6, we're already having some threats, taking on d3, bringing the bishop to f5 to attack the pawn, which is on d3. bringing the rook out, and so on. And also knight on g4 is free to go at some moment to e5 or f6 if it's being chased. So there is no more issue with the knight, and well, we're having good chances, good position here, absolutely no problem. We equalized. Knight takes a4. It's a very, very tricky move, because if we're going to take on a4, there is a c3, which comes with a double attack, attacking the bishop and the rook. In case we go back with a rook, take on b4, we take on b4. After e5, there are some issues, because white is putting a lot of pressure, and the pawn on e4 is probably going to be not so easy to attack, and our knight will have to find some awkward squares. So here we can go with the rook e8 immediately. We're not caring about that pawn. We're targeting the pawn on e4. And we say, of course, meanwhile, thank you to white for opening up the a file for us. So in case a3 play, targeting the bishop, which makes a lot of sense. Here we can already go for rook a4, because after c3, rook a8, cb, we can go for knight b4. And after e5, we have knight d3, queen d3, and knight h7. We're going to go and play for b6, bishop b7, and after knight f8, we're going to have very solid position. Maybe I put the knight on e6, or maybe the knight is going just to defend the pawn on d7 later on. So yeah, super nice position for black. We are having a pawn advantage, but of course there is a compensation. No, actually we don't have, because we gave up the a pawn. Yeah, so we don't have actually the pawn advantage. But okay, position is around equal. So c3, trying to challenge the bishop right away. Here we are going all the way back to f8. That's why we also played rook e8, to have the square for a bishop, because all the other squares either didn't work or they were a bit too awkward. So here rook e8, defending the pawn on e4. Meanwhile, we are down a pawn. Let's not forget that. But now we have d5. Generally, when rook is on e1, it's very nice to go for this d5 option. So if e5, then we have knight e4, and there are some big problems with the e5 pawn and how to defend it. So that's why let's look what happens after e takes d5. Well, then we trade the rooks, of course, and we take on d5 with the queen. We're currently down one pawn, but white is very passive. The pieces are still standing on the queen side. The knight is all the way backwards. The other knight is on a4. Which is also not really having squares. So there are some issues, while our pieces are going to be very active, and we'll bring them very quickly into the position. So there is definitely at least a compensation for black. So knight b3 we looked. Now we're going for the other option, which is the knight takes c6. So this looks very logical. Knight is being attacked, trading the knights, pawn takes. And here there are again a few moves. So bishop g5 makes a lot of sense. Many times in this line, bishop g5 has to be tested, because I mean, it's first of all, it's creating a pin, threatening the e5, and so on and so on. So this one of the main line. To go for the bishop g5 at some moment. That's why we most likely are going to transpose, because after h6, bishop h4, castle. So if bishop d3 is going to be played, then we are going to always to transpose. Let's say bishop d3, rook e8. If queen f3, then we have g5, and after bishop g3 we have d5. Actually, very interesting idea, since we opened our bishop from c8, and now this bishop coming with a huge power to g4. And now white is actually lost. So here, in case of the castle, bishop d4, we're going to transpose to the bishop d3 line. So that's why let's look at queen f3. Maybe there is some idea here, but it can also transpose definitely. So what is the main idea here is that there is a pin on the knight, and white includes another piece targeting the knight, so threatens something. So here we have to defend the knight basically, and we go for bishop d4. Long castle happens, but let's not forget we have the semi-open file, semi-open b file, and okay, currently the bishop is under attack. We have to move it away. But after a few moves, we're going to play. I mean, not after a few moves, but we are planning to play d6, bishop e6, bring in the rook to the b file because it's going to be a very good, file to put pressure on the white's king, which is on the queen side. Let's see what happens after e5. Well, e5 is not really a good idea at all here because we're using the fact that the king is still in the center and pinning it instantly. Rook e8. If queen e2 is being played, we have d5 option, since after castle, queen d7, we remove the queen from the pin because pawn cannot take the knight since the queen is still hanging. So bishop f6 looks like the most sense. Pawn takes, but now after knight e4, because it's the only move which can stop us from taking on e5 like this. Knight e4, bishop goes back to e6, takes in f6, and bishop d6. Because now actually the knight is going to be pinned, and we're going to win it, since our bishop is blocking this pin on our queen. Amazing line, and it's working out all perfectly. f4 in this position, trying to defend the pawn on e5, of course, looks logical. And here we go for the d5 immediately. So our idea is to go for more space. We're opening the bishop, potentially coming to the g4 square. There are ideas of pushing also g5 pawn, because then e5 is going to fall most likely. In case of bishop e2, we have g5, and the center is just falling apart. We're attacking too many pieces. In case of e takes f6, we grab the bishop on h4, and basically the dark squares are super weak for white. White cannot castle right now, and I don't know when white is going to castle. So on the dark squares, the position is already lost for white, and it's very difficult to find a defense. In case f takes g5, here it's very interesting. It looks like similar to some of the Queen's Gambit declined lines where bishop is on g5 and h6 and g5 is played and white is taking. Here we have an intermediate move, removing the knight. And we have to remove it on the good square, which is d7. First of all, we are attacking the pawn on e5, and we are also targeting the pawn on g5. And of course, white cannot take because bishop on h4 is hanging. So that's why its position is already much better for black. That was e5 move. And now let's look at the bishop c4. But bishop c4, it's even worse than bishop d3 because here d5 is coming even with the tempo. Because white is trying to stop d5, but it's actually just working out. So e d5 is being played. Now we attack the bishop with the g5 and getting rid of the pin. Bishop g3, now rook e8, tempo check, again, very important. In case of king moving to f1, we have bishop g4, another attack on the queen. If f3, again, weakening a lot of the dark squares. Oh, sorry. A lot of the dark squares. After bishop f5, dc, we have queen e7. We are not trading the rooks, but we are introducing more and more threats in the position. Our other rook is coming to the position where the d file, and white has big problems here how to hold the position. Bishop e2 coming back, trying to block the check with the bishop. Makes a lot of sense, but here we go with knight d5. This is a very, very nice option because because if white is going to take on d5, we can consider even trading the queens, since the white will not be able to castle. So after knight d5, queen d5, cd5, there is a problem on e2. White cannot really move the king too far, cannot castle, cannot remove it. And there are some threats already, like playing f5, f4, trapping the bishop on g3, or there is a bishop a6, very, very nasty trick, attacking the bishop and trying to win it. So that's why it's not really so good for white. e5 move, well, it's a little bit too ambitious, to be honest. I mean, it's good to be ambitious, but it's just too much. Because here we can go for queen e7, targeting the pawn, pinning it to the king, because pawn cannot take anymore. f4, trying to defend, but now we have d6, putting more pressure on e5. After queen e2, we're just grabbing it, pawn takes, and knight g4, attacking it again. Basically, with this moves, white weakened the dark squares even more, creating all kinds of threat possible for black. We're going to castle on next move, win the pawn on e5, and put more and more pressure on the king. So if bishop f4 trying to defend, and they again have d6, queen e2 trying to block our pin, and here we take on e5, bishop takes, and now bishop f2, very nice move, because since queen cannot take, I mean queen could take, but we take the bishop on e5. Then after king takes, we have knight g4, it's a fork, and we're going to grab the bishop back. We'll have an extra pawn in this endgame. Queen e2 is the most correct way to react on this pin with queen e7. So here we are forced to move the knight from f6, since this is a huge threat. We go knight d5. And main point of this is that now we can make it, since the queen on d1 is not anymore on d1, and it's not controlling the d5 square. So if knight takes, pawn takes, now we have a pawn in the center, by the way. Bishop f4 trying to defend the pawn. Okay, makes a lot of sense. Rook b8, putting more pressure on the pawn on b2. In case of long castle, there is a very nice move, bishop a3. It's already winning, because after this bishop sacrifice, king cannot really escape too far, and there are going to be big problems for white. So king cannot really go forward because there is bishop a6 and so on. So the position is already very bad. If queen goes to g4, which is putting pressure on g7 square, we're going to play g6, just stopping all kinds of attacks, because we cannot castle long any longer. If we could have castled, maybe we could have developed the bishop, but other than that, we cannot really afford sacrificing a pawn right here. Knight f4 is another option. It's targeting the bishop on c5 and also putting the knight on the active square. Now we have bishop d4, which is attacking the pawn on e5, and we are threatening to take it the next move. So f4, white has to defend it. We're going now with the f5, which is very interesting move, attacking the knight and saying that, okay, taking on f6 doesn't look so good, because it's going to put more pressure on the e file, and this pawn on e5 is so good, white wouldn't really want to trade it. So let's see what happens if white is not taking the pawn, playing something like knight g5. Then we have rook b8, and the pawn on b2 is kind of lost, because after c3, we can sacrifice knight c3. Okay, taking on c3 would be very bad, because the rook on a1 is going to be lost. So queen d2, white is trying something else. And here we go, queen c5, defending everything. Again, taking on c3 doesn't really work out. Knight f3 targeting the bishop, which makes a lot of sense, but now we have rook b4, which is defending. Everything is working out, we are defending very well. And now after knight takes d4, we have knight e4 intermediate move attacking the queen, and that's why we can take in the next move on d4. So this was a knight g5. Now we're looking at knight f2, jumping all the way back, a bit awkward square, but what to do? So now we have queen b4, which is a double attack, checking the king and attacking the pawn on b2. So queen d2, we are forced to trade, and after take, we have the bishop takes b2, also with a tempo, and yeah, kind of we won a pawn, we have a very good endgame, and we have the most active pieces in this position. So what happens in case of the en passant does happen? We discuss that, okay, white doesn't really want to do it, but what else is left to do? So here we're taking with a knight, and basically we're getting into slightly better position due to our nice pawns. They are doubled, but they are nice pawns, and we are having more active pieces, definitely. So this would be a good endgame to go for black. Bishop c4. So this is a pretty risky move, because on d3, bishop is normally defending on e4. Now it's not defending anymore, and also d5 could be a tempo at some moment. So originally we wanted to play in this position the d5 move, but so here after d5, one second. castle, and yeah, in this position. So originally I wanted to recommend to playing d5 here, but unfortunately the lines are getting a bit too sharp, and sometimes there are lines where white can hold to a draw, but you can of course use them if you want to. So let's start and look at this idea, d5. So the main point of it that after, okay, let's first start with a bishop d3, which doesn't make much sense. Definitely going back, it's not a critical line. Then we have bishop g4 attacking the queen. f3 is impossible due to the pin on the king. Queen d2, rook e8, and rook e1. Bishop g5, moving bishop all the way back. And well, now we have an idea to bring in the position the knight. That's why we moved back the bishop. So e5 looks like the main move, and in this position, very strong move is knight g4, putting pressure on the king's position. Now we already threatened to jump with the queen all the way to h4. So there are many interesting lines. Let's start with the bishop coming back to e2, attacking the knight. So now we have to do something. We cannot just play queen. I mean, we could play queen h2, but maybe it's not the best. So queen h2, bishop takes, queen d3, bishop d6, attacking h4, and after h3, queen h5. We're definitely having a compensation for the pawn, even for 2 pawns if white is taking on c6. And we can maybe introduce the other pieces into the attack, bring in the rook in some way on the 5th rank or 6th rank if white's taking on c6. So definitely a good idea. But there is another option, which is knight takes on h2, sacrificing a whole knight. Because after king takes, there is a queen h4 check, king g1, and now bishop d6, threatening a checkmate. So in case of f4 in this position, we have bishop c5 coming back. Well, and again, there is going to be, it's very close to a checkmate. So yeah, pretty bad position. So let's see what happens after g3. Well, after g3, we have bishop g3, pawn takes, queen takes, and we can secure the draw just like that. So bishop f4, trying to defend everything, bringing the piece into defense. And here we have another sacrifice, knight takes f2, because after rook takes f2, bishop takes, king takes, we have queen h4 again, attacking king and the bishop. And also at the same time, there is a pin on the bishop on c4, so something like bishop g3 would not really work. So g3 has to be played to defend everything. And now after queen takes h2, king f3, c d5. Here white has a few options. For example, if queen d5, then h5 and bishop g4 is coming with a huge threat. If knight takes on d5, we have bishop b7, pinning on this diagonal, and after g4 we have queen h3 check, bishop g3, then f5 could be a move, and opening up the rook would crush white's position. Sorry, like this. And if king goes to f2, then we have rook f2 d8, pinning this knight and creating some very nice and nasty threat. So bishop goes to f1, trying to attack and kick the queen out of the position. Queen h4 with a check, intermediate. Bishop goes back to g3, trying to defend from the check. Queen g5, c4. And after c6, bishop f4, queen h4, we basically get into again, another draw variation with threefold repetition. But there is also bishop d5 option, because after pawn takes, we take with the rook and we are still attacking the king. The position is, I mean, objectively speaking, is around equal, but we have an opportunities for an attack. But there are 2 bishops for white, so they could defend maybe better with those 2 bishops. But again, we have a huge power with 2 rooks and queen, which can try to attack the king here. That's definitely interesting line. If bishop takes on d5, then we go h5 immediately with the bishop g4 threat. Queen d2, bishop g4, king e3, and now rook if e8. We introduced the rook into the position. King comes to d4. We're lucky we're not playing king of the hill, then we would have lost here. But we have here bishop e2, very interesting move, sacrificing. because after bishop e3, we play c5, king takes, queen g3, and now white is taking another piece. Rook a to c8, king d5. We're bringing the queen to c7, king a4, and now we have a repetition, another repetition, which is very interesting that we're getting so many repetitions in this line, and that's why it's not really working so much in case white is finding this. Of course, there is a way that there is an opportunity that white is not seeing this, because it's also pretty difficult. Queen d3, introducing the queen on the third rank to put it somewhere to defend, for example. But here we take first on d5. In case of knight d5, we have bishop e6, putting pressure on d5, bishop f4. After knight f2, rook f2, again taking all the pawns, we have c6. If knight goes to c7, attacking our rook on e8, then we have queen f6, pinning the bishop, kind of allowing white to take on a8, but due to the problems with the pawns, with a material imbalance, it's not going to be so good for white, because that's why queen e4 is played, attacking, defending the bishop. Bishop c4, knight a8, queen h4 check. So now king goes back to g1, and here bishop d5 attacking the queen from e4. And basically at the end of the line, we should be able to capture the knight from a8. And objectively, again, it's not equal position, but we might still have some attacking opportunities. If bishop goes to c7, attacking our queen, we have to play queen d7. And after knight f6 check, we take queen d3, king h8, queen f4, king g7, queen d3, and we have such a funny repetition because there is no way for us to actually stop the attack here against our king. We cannot really defend the pawn so easily. So that's how we repeat in another way. And after knight e3, then we are just going for queen f6, and we're actually crushing here due to the pin on the king. So if bishop takes on d5 in this position, then we have a bishop a6, queen a6, queen h4, attacking everywhere. a3, knight f2, king has to go away, but after bishop d6 check, it's very difficult now for white. It's becoming difficult and more difficult. Knight, king g1, and now knight g3 takes, queen g3 check, bishop g2, the only way to defend, and now queen h2, king f2, queen g3, and again we have another repetition in this line. So that's why, of course, it's possible that white is not finding it, but it's also possible that they do. And if we want to be more maybe ambitious and not to go into the sharp lines, of course, if your opponent doesn't like these sharp lines and attacks and imbalances of the material, it makes sense to go for this line. But generally, would recommend rook e8. We put even more pressure on the e4 pawn. We are becoming, we're keeping it calm. We're not going all in with the d5 move. And just improving our pieces. So rook e1 makes some sense because just bringing a rook again on the e file, defending the pawn. The problem is that it's also removing the rook from the f file, where there could be some issue on f2. So here we go with a d5 immediately, since the bishop was on c4, it's under attack. And yes, generally when rook is on e1, d5 is coming with a bigger power. Pawn takes, rook e1 takes. Now we can grab on d5, bishop goes to d3, and now knight g4 again, attacking the f2 square and also h2 potential. Knight d1 trying to defend everything, and okay, here we cannot of course move the queen due to the problem on e8, but we can go bishop d6, attacking the h2 square again. h3, now knight goes to e5, attacking the bishop. We are ready to bring the queen to the action. The h3 potentially is a threat. At some moment we threaten to grab it and to sacrifice our bishop there to create an attack. So yeah, definitely we have much more active pieces in this position. We are not even down a pawn here. So yeah, great position for black and clearly better. If queen goes to f3, it also makes sense because we're white is improving the queen and defending on e4. So now we are ready to go for the d6. We are preparing to go for bishop e6 and just to remove all this pressure which just been created against the f7 pawn. h3, stopping the bishop g4 move. Now bishop e6 according to the plan. Bishop goes back to d3, knight e7, and now we're ready to go in with the queen to h4. We are ready to bring the knight to the e5 square. We're having such a good position. We can potentially take the bishop on d3. We'll decide that later, but we have a very good position. We have, okay, maybe not the best pawn structure, but for now it's good. We can say that the pawn on e4 brings more space for white's position in the center, but it's also blocking the bishop, and also it's also a target potentially for us. So yeah, that's why I would say we're having some good chances in this position. Bishop g5, pinning the knight and already putting pressure on f6. Here we have to go with the h6. We go and we attack it immediately. So bishop goes to h4. Now we go for g5. And now we're basically very safe in this position. And generally we play g5 when, for example, f4 is not we will not see f4 for at least some time. So bishop goes to g3, bishop e6 now. We're ready because we're defending everything. The main idea here after trading, we're going to double or even triple our pieces, our heavy pieces on the e-file, and put so much pressure against the e4 pawn. Bishop g5 immediately is also, of course, an opportunity, creating a pin here. And here we're going to go for interesting approach. So h6 is definitely possible. And basically after bishop h4, the most important is not to rush with a g5. We're talking about g5 in the many positions that we sometimes go for it. The idea is just to get rid of this annoying pin, because many times it's super annoying. But to illustrate, in this particular case, it's a pretty bad idea, because after bishop g3, we take the pawn, there is a sacrifice on f7, king takes, knight takes, rook takes, queen f3. Double attack. Rook f4, bishop takes, pawn takes, and here another double attack on the king and the bishop. And white is actually winning here, because we're at the end of the line, we're down in exchange. So we have to be really careful to see when we can and when we cannot actually attack the bishop just like that with h6 and g5, just to get rid of it. So here we're going for queen e7, which is a very nice move and is pretty typical in this kind of structure. The point of this move is that we don't want to bring the bishop back to e7 to break the pin, but we want to be active. We want to actively break the pin with moving queen to a5. Also, potentially, there are some ideas for first of all, okay, we are defending the bishop on c5, and okay, there could be ideas of going with bishop on b4 as well, targeting the knight on c3. And from e5 also there is some pressure on the b2 pawn, not only attacking the bishop. But we have to be always careful, because sometimes f4 is actually a move. So after queen e5, there could be an f4. Let's say if rook e1 is being played. This is just not good because it's blundering a pawn, since after bishop f2, king f2, queen c5. It's a triple attack, by the way, targeting both bishops and the king. After bishop e3, we take on c4, and we're up a pawn. Queen f3, attacking the knight on f6, targeting it and inviting to create some weakness. So here we go h6. In case of bishop goes to h4, we have bishop d4. It's a very typical move in this positions, defending the knight from d4 square and also controlling any of the e5 pushes. Bishop takes c6, f6, sorry, we take, trade the queens, and here rook f e1. Here the problem is rook b8, and if we get such similar endgames where we have a bishop pair and we have some weaknesses we can try to attack, then generally it's completely fine endgame. Of course, speaking about the pawn structure, we can see we have more weaknesses, but it's not so easy to find a way for white to attack them. Meanwhile, we are actually targeting their weaknesses and their pawns. So, and again, bishop pair is also kind of compensates for that. King h1. King h1 is already a sign for you. If you have bishop on c5 and king moves to h1, it's a huge sign that f4 can be played. For example, after queen e5, there is f4 immediately. So we have to react here. And we go for bishop b5. We're putting the pressure on the c3 knight as well as on e4 pawn, because we threaten to take on c3 and take on e4, introducing a threat of queen c5, attacking both bishops at the same time. So f4, white is going for it. Now white is ready to play e5 and win a knight, so we have to do something, and we go with a d5. We're forcing white to take on e5, so there is no e5. So let's see what happens in case e5 happens anyway. Then we have cd, grabbing the bishop. White takes on f6. We play queen d6, removing the queen from the attack. We don't take on f6 to weaken our pawn structure. In the next move, we are threatening to play bishop f5, and if queen takes on d6, we're going to reanimate our pawn structure with a pawn takes on d6, which is also a very nice move. E takes d5 is another option, something what we wanted. Bishop takes on c3 happens, and here after pawn takes on c3, I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. Of course, it's queen c5. Of course, queen c5, attacking the bishop on c4, attacking the pawn on d5. Okay, now bishop is not attacked because it's defended by the pawn right now. So there are many threats, definitely. So bishop f6, now we take on c4 because we don't want to pin on f6. And well, now we're going to win back the pawn because bishop has to move or something should happen here. We are most likely taking on d5 in the next move because, of course, white has to do something with the bishop on f6. I'm sorry. Wait a second. That was the bishop. No, it was knight 6 line. Sorry, it was knight 6 line, and it was e5. No, it was not e5. It was bishop c4. Yeah, it was bishop c4. Sorry. Now we go to bishop d3, which is not the most popular move for white. Just defending the pawn and not allowing this d5 option. That's why this bishop c4 is a bit worse. So that's why this bishop d3 is the most common move. I'm just trying to check. Yeah, we had this position. Okay, perfect. So now we're getting to this position. We're castling, and now white has a chance to castle or not. What they're going to do. Knight a4 is another option. Attacking the bishop, creating a threat. Bishop goes back to b6, castle, rook e8, putting a pressure on the e4 pawn, rook e1, then d5. So the d5 is generally a very typical idea, which we are having in the most of the e4, e5 opening. So we have this d5 move, which we have to look after sometimes. So e5 here, then we go knight g4, attacking the pawn on e5. Our bishop is defending, the knight. Knight takes b6, we have queen h4 intermediate move, which is creating a lot of threats, h3, knight f2, targeting the queen e2, knight e3, grabbing the bishop, pawn takes, and we then at the end of the line we take on on b6. We're fixing our pawn structure on the queen side. Meanwhile, we're grabbing a pawn and we're completely winning here. Pawn takes on d5, then we have rook e1, we're trading the rooks. That's another point of this d5 that is very, very good working against particular this rook e1. So now queen d5, knight b6, cb happens again. We are managed to fix our pawn structure, and we equalized here. White is having a bishop pair, but position is fine. We have more active pieces currently. So knight takes on b6 can happen immediately. Then we take with the a pawn because we don't know, maybe white is going to take also on d5 here. Okay, so bishop g5, we just put a lot of pressure and threatens e5 move. We have h6. Most of the time, again, when bishop comes to g5, we have to play, or we not have to play, but we have an option to play h6 to ask a question and kick the bishop out of there. So bishop takes on f6 because actually removing the bishop, particularly in this case, would lead white with losing. Would it lose the material? Yeah, white would lose the material on e4. So that's why white has to take on f6. We grab it. Pawn takes on d5. We have to trade the pieces. And here we cannot yet take on d5 because there is going to be some annoying check. Actually, checkmate because the bishop is on h7 holding the square. So we have to play bishop f5 here. And after trade of the bishops, pawn takes on c6. Currently, white is up 2 pawns, but we're going to grab on c2. And now we're going to attack. We're going to grab either c6 or b2 pawn. We're going to equalize here. We're going to have a pretty much equal endgame. If pawn takes on d5, then of course we have to include the rook d1 move. Queen takes c1, queen d5, bishop f4, and bishop f5. So now we're ready to trade the bishops. Bishop f1, not allowing to trade, but then we have bishop c2, and after bishop c7, we have b5 move, and now we're getting into the position where we're already kind of slightly better here as black due to the problems for white on the a file. So that's why this knight a4 is not really a good option. So bishop g5. Bishop g5 makes a lot of sense and transposes to some of the lines, which we already had. So the thing is, white could also start with this move right away, but the problem is that after rook e8, basically going to transpose the main line, because if not castle, then it will not transpose, but castle will happen. So h6, bishop h4, and bishop d4 will just transpose to the 8th move castle. So now we're getting there. Castle, rook e8, bringing the rook, attacking the pawn on e4 at the same time, putting more pressure, creating a threat of the bishop d4 to put pressure on the knight on c3. So h3 is the first move to check. Okay, the main idea of h3 is like more of a waiting move, blocking the ideas of knight jumping on g4, bishop jumping to g4. So here we go for bishop d4, makes a lot of sense. If rook e1, then we are having rook b8 and we are putting pressure on b2, so that bishop cannot really go out to g5 in the near future. If knight goes to e2, targeting our bishop, we move it back to b6, because now we're moving it, not just removing the bishop, but we're also attacking the pawn on e5. We're moving back with a tempo. Now it is a threat. So in case of knight goes to c3 back, first of all, we can just repeat if we want to draw, of course. If we don't want to draw, we can go for d6, bishop g5, h6, get rid of this bishop, and after g5, bishop g3, we can play bishop d7 and just try to play a game, just continuing the game. If we don't want, we can always go for a draw. If knight goes to g3 and defends the pawn on e4 from g3, well, then we're having the d5 move, since knight is not on c3 any longer. ED happens, CD, undoubling our pawns, which is also very good. Queen f3, just removing the queen, also preparing some bishop g5 or bringing the rooks to the files. And here we go with the bishop d4 again. Firstly, we're defending the knight on f6. Secondly, we're controlling the b2 square so that the bishop cannot redevelop from c1 just yet. So yeah, we're getting into this position, and bishop can actually go to the e5 square if needed. In case of queen f3, instantly So generally, this move is not so great in these lines because it's blocking the way for the pawn to go forward, because f4 is something what white wants to do to support the pawn on e4 and get strong center. So here we can go for d6 because because we cannot really play for d5. If we cannot go for d5, we go for d6. Or if we don't like the lines where we go for the d5. So d6 happens, bishop g5, pinning the knight. Again, similar to previous line, bishop d4 again, defending and attacking the knight on c3. Queen g3 moves away. Now queen e7, we are ready to bring the rook to b8. We are ready to bring the queen to e5. And, well, we're just having a counterplay here, pressure on c3, also pressure on e4. No problems with the king side for us, so for sure we shouldn't worry about that. And still, the pawn is pinned to the king, so f4 is not really happening in the next moves. Case of rook e1, which makes a lot of sense. White is defending the pawn on e4, also introducing ideas of pushing the pawn forward. Here we can go immediately with a d5 move. It's very important to know whenever the rook is on e1, it simplifies for us the d5 move. So now in case of e5, we have knight g4, and basically we are going to grab the pawn since the f4 is not possible due to the pin on the king. And also queen h4 is, by the way, coming. So not only we're going to grab the pawn, but also we're going to probably win the game in the next few moves. With bishop g5, which makes a lot of sense, pinning the knight, threatening to take on d5. Here we go for h6, our favorite move, attacking the bishop. Now, if bishop takes on f6, queen f6, we're just getting a big tempo on f2. Now, white does not have time to take on d5 intermediately, so we're getting very good position. Bishop goes back to h4. That's the position where we transpose to. Here we go with a g5 forward. g5, bishop g3, removing the bishop. We weakened our pawn structure, but of course we have to follow it up. We cannot just keep it like this statically. We have to follow up with dynamic play. So we continue. Bishop g4, attacking the queen. Queen has to move somewhere. If queen d2, d takes e2, queen is hanging on d2, bishop cannot move. We won a piece here. If queen goes to c1, well, here we have knight h5, attacking the bishop on g3, threatening to take it, first of all, bringing the queen to f6, attacking the pawn on f2. Many threats in the position. We have definitely a counterplay here. This was a bishop g5 move. In case e takes d5, after we play d5, then we first attack with the bishop the queen. Since that if we would take on e1, bishop g4 would not make any sense. So rook takes e8, queen e8. This was with a check. Queen f1, and now c takes d5 here. Bishop f4 looks like a very nice developing move, but here we play queen d7. We're ready to bring the rook to the e file, support the d5 pawn with the c6 pawn. And even though the white structure is slightly better in this endgame, we're having a better developed pieces, the pieces which are more active. So for that, it compensates the pawn structure, and we are definitely going to have some initiative and ideas to attack white. This was rook e1. Now we're going into the bishop g5, basically transposing already. Pretty much this bishop g5 is the most annoying move against this setup, but we can deal with it. We can deal with it. Playing h6. So playing h6 is pretty much already like automatic reaction on the move. It's very useful always to start it. It doesn't mean that we necessarily going to play g5 in the next move, but we will see, and at some moment g5 is going to be good, since now white has to decide to take or to remove the bishop. And after g5 at some moment was played, then there is no decision anymore for white. So bishop goes to h4, bishop d4 again. We're stopping ideas on coming with a pawn to e5. We're defending the knight on f6, at the same time putting pressure on the c3 and b2 squares. The bishop is perfect on d4. if knight goes to e2, targeting the bishop because white has to do something, it's not really a very interesting move, because here, if we want, we can play bishop b6, and after knight c3, we can just repeat the moves. But of course, we can also take on b2, because here after f4, which creates a huge threat of e5, we can go. Okay, if we play bishop a1, just 1 second, after queen a1, d6, knight g3, we're going to lose because we have huge problems on f6. Knight h5 is coming, we're just lost. So here we must play d6, stopping the e5 idea, and rook b1. After rook b1, we play rook b8, rook b2, rook takes, and now knight g3 with the idea of coming to the h5 square, attacking the knight. So basically, this position is look very risky for black, and I'm not advising to go into this position. So that's why this knight e2 can be always followed up with a bishop b6, knight c3, and bishop b4, just going for a draw instead of being greedy and taking the pawn. So in case of queen f3, which also makes a lot of sense, again, some threats are in position, like playing knight e2 and so on. But unfortunately, it doesn't really work out due to the bishop on d3, because after g5, bishop g3, we have d5 move. With the threat of bishop g4, actually, we're going to trap the queen here, and, well, d5 is working out brilliantly. In case of rook e1, which is kind of repetition of our move, we put the rook on e8, white put rook on e1, defending the pawn. We are ready to play rook b8, targeting the pawn on b2, since e5 is not a threat. So here knight e4 is possible, but it's not really a perfect square for the knight. Definitely there are some threats in the position, but we can just go d6, since after queen d2, we can play g5. Now it's working. After bishop g3, we can go for knight h5. And again, if we're playing something like this, we're going for g5, we have to have a follow-up and ideas after that. Ideas in this case is that after trading the knight for the bishop, we're going to have a bishop on this diagonal, on the long diagonal, and bishop is going to defend the king. So king is not going to be weak on g8. So that's kind of an idea. And we're going to have a bishop pair in the position, which is great. And meanwhile, white's pieces are not so active, like a knight on a4. So rook b1 is another move, defending the pawn on b2. Then we can go again with a g5, and we're going to get pretty sharp position. So we're have to try to create ideas of knight taking on e4 in the position. So bishop g3, now rook b2, very strong move, but the problem is that it's not crushing or something like this. White can still defend it. Rook b2, bishop takes c3, double attack. Now rook goes all the way to b8, and there are already some threats at some moment with bishop a6, bishop e1, queen e1, and now knight e4. We're winning another pawn. And after bishop e4, we have d5. We're going to grab the piece back, that's true. We're up of 2 pawns in this particular case, but due to the weaknesses on our king and our pawn structure, the position will remain around equal, because white will for sure have a compensation for all the piece activity and for our bad pawn structure. So yeah, around equal position, but definitely great to play. King h1. So whenever king h1 is played, then it means that f4 move is already introduced, and we have to be alerted. We have to be on high alert, because if white is managing to go f4 and get this position, with the pawns on f4 and e4, white is going to be so good. So for example, in case we go something like d6, very important here, f4, and we don't really have much of a chances in this position. I mean, we will for sure have chances, but it's very difficult to play this. So we must play g5 here. Here g5 is necessary. Bishop g3, and now bishop c3, we are taking the knight, trading it, and creating some weak pawns, and taking the pawn on e4. Knight e4, And white is trying to open up our king with the move f4. It's going probably to transpose the queen h4, queen h5 lines, which we're going to look in a moment. So let's say after d6, queen h4, bishop f5, we're going to reach pretty much equality in these lines. And after knight g3, then pawn takes, we have queen f6, and here basically if queen f5 is played, we're going to transpose the queen h5, we're going to transpose the queen h5 lines. So f takes g5, queen takes, queen f3, and queen d5. And kind of we're doing fine because we're defending on f7. We are ready at some moment to develop the piece, but of course white will not let black to develop, and after queen g4, queen g5, we're most likely going to end up in a draw position. So queen h5 immediately, then we're going for queen f6. If bishop takes on c7, taking the material back, taking back the pawn, it allows us to close the king side, because after d6, f4, we have a g4 very strong move. So now after rook d1, bishop f5, bishop takes, rook takes, and after rook d6, we have rook e6 back. We're going to have opposite colored bishops in this endgame draw, which result is very likely. Even though we weaken the king side, it's not much because we fully defend everything and the position is closed. So what happens in case of f4? Wait, then here we cannot already close like we could before with move g4 because our bishop is not opened. So that's why we have to do something. In this position, there are two options for you. You can choose which options you prefer. One option is more solid and the other option is more ambitious. So ambitious option is knight takes g3 and the safe option is queen g6. So let's first start with the ambitious one. Oh, sorry, with the safe one. So in case of queen g6, queen goes back to f3, g4, bishop takes. We're trading the pieces, trading everything, getting into the endgame. Okay, this one is this line is pretty good for black. This here is of course the big advantage, extra pawn. But of course, white has better options. In case of queen g4, then we have f5, and of course we get better position. But after queen takes g6, pawn takes on g5, pawn takes on g5, bishop c7, after d5. We're getting around equal position. We have some issues with the pawns. There is a bishop pair for white. Of course, there is also double pawns for white as well. So yeah, definitely around even position. Anyone can win this one, but yeah, still more solid approach. And more ambitious one for which we are opting out is knight takes on g3. So we're going into some more complicated lines. So after hg, we play rook e7. Very important move. If you don't remember this move, then go for queen g6. Rook e7, super important move because now the rook is covering f7 square, so there is no longer problem with taking on g5. So here, in case fg, we can take with a queen, so f7 is not hanging. Queen f3 coming back, g6, introducing our bishop to the game. Queen takes e6, rook b8. Position is equal, but of course we can look at the boss kings. Boss kings are a little bit shaky. I wouldn't say any longer that our king is weaker than the white's king, so maybe it's already our king, which is a bit safer. And after rook a1, then we trade the rooks. We play d6. We enter in the game with bishop, rook e8, pinning the rook, and also at the same time checking. We have king g7, takes, queen h4, trade of the queens. And now after bishop b7, rook e7, targeting pawn on c7. We go back with the bishop, rook c7, if white is trying to be ambitious here. In case of a4, we have a5. We're just fixing the pawn on the light square. Rook c6, bishop d7, rook c8, and we're going to either pick up c3 pawn or a4. So, and bishop endgame is also drawish. Okay, so bishop e4 here, we have a5, bishop c6, and rook b8, and basically we're going to bring the rook, we're going to bring the rook to the b2 squares, target all the weaknesses which white has. And in case rook takes on c6, then we grab pawn on a2, rook d6, and after a5, we're even having a more dangerous pawn because it's further away and it's not so easy to stop it on the squares of a2. So white actually has to be careful because after bishop e4, we're playing rook a2, rook d1, bishop e6, rook a1, a4. We're coming with a rook all the way forward, bishop d7. We'll introduce the king in the position. We don't really have some problems here, and we're not risking to lose this end game. But of course, most likely we're also not winning it. So yeah, this something what can happen. But of course, it's like already too much forwards. At some moment, white can make mistake, and we can be better. But definitely, this knight g3 is a bit more ambitious. So knight c6, we looked at this variation, and now we're going to the main move, which is normally being played, which is bishop e3. It's protecting the knight on d5, knight on d4, sorry, and creating a threat of knight takes on c6. Here, in comparison to the Scotch game where the bishop is coming to e3 without the knights on c3 and f6, we had an option of queen f6. Now we don't have this option, so we have to do something else. And here comes the most interesting part, because here we are going for bishop b4, which is a very rare move, very interesting, and it looks very strange. If you look at it at the first glance, it looked like, why did we spend 2 tempos if we could have played bishop b4? And here we can already start a discussion if bishop is better located on e3 or on c1. And here comes already some ideas in the picture. First of all, the knight g4 would be always some kind of a tempo on the bishop, because we play knight g4 in these lines, and bishop will be under attack. This is first point. Second point is that bishop on e3 is stopping the way from the rook to defend the pawn on e4. So that's why we can put more pressure on the pawn on e4. Thirdly, what did I want to say? If we push for d5, if we go for d5, then after take on d5, we will take with a knight targeting the bishop. So bishop would be already under attack. So this is another idea. And so generally this is very interesting, that bishop on e3 can be even worse. And sometimes what white is doing, white is putting the bishop on g5, which would kind of transpose to the bishop b4 line. So this the Spanish variation of the 4 knights of the Scotch game, we would transpose there, but we also have to be careful not to transpose to those lines which are not really ambitious for black, or not so fun to play. So bishop g5 is first move which we're looking at. So basically what white sees, okay, bishop c5, bishop b4, black is playing. Okay, we can also spend the tempo and go for bishop g5. But that's actually not very good, because basically what happened now is that we transpose to this line, bishop b4, bishop g5, which is not normally played. So bishop c5, bishop e3, and bishop g5. Okay, so here we're going with our main option, going for h6, targeting the bishop, asking it to go away. If bishop takes on f6, queen f6, knight db5, attacking the pawn on c5, we have bishop a5, very strong move, defending the pawn and threatening the move a6 to kick the knight away. Bishop goes to h4. Here, g5 would be a bit too early. So, for example, if g5, we will go g5, bishop goes away. It feels like we win a pawn, but after knight c6, pawn takes, queen d4, triple attack is in the picture. Bishop c3, pawn takes, castle. Okay, white cannot really take the knight because of the rook e8. Bishop d3, d5, bishop takes, pawn takes, h5. White is just breaking our position part by part. Bishop g4, takes. The queens are traded. King h7. Okay, we are reaching some we're reaching some around equal position. It's for sure, I mean, it's for sure tough to lose as black, but it's something what is very unnecessary if we want to simplify the game so early on, going into these lines. And we, of course, want to be ambitious and want to fight. So that's why we castle first. And now g5 is actually a threat. Now it's a huge threat because e4, knight can take on e4. So now the question what white can do. F3, trying to be solid, defending the pawn on e4 makes sense. But then we are immediately striking the center with a d5. Knight c6, bc, bishop d3. g5, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes to f2. Now d e4 happens after bishop e4. We have bishop a6, stopping the castle opportunity for white. White's king is staying in the center for time being. Looking at the post structure, okay, it's not so great, but the king is in the center. We can bring the rooks into the position. Also, we can spoil the pawn structure if we want to later for white as well. If knight takes on c6 here, then we take and we're going to transpose the knight c6 line, so it doesn't make sense to go here. And basically now we go to the knight c6. At some moment knight is going to take on c6, so it looks like it makes sense to include it now. We're going to transpose some of the lines anyway. So bishop takes f6, white is trading everything, queen f6, queen f3, we're happy to trade the queens also, and after castle we're just getting the endgame with a bishop pair with some weaknesses for white with the pin, by the way, and well, we're getting for sure at least a clear advantage in this endgame. Bishop d2, coming back, defending the knight so that there is no knight e4. But the problem is that we already threatened to take on f3. Well, then white is going to have an attack on the g7 pawn. So queen e7 is typical move how we are continuing, how we are threatening to take on e4. So if bishop d3, which is defending the pawn, this is actually not working because it's dropping the pawn. Since after bishop c3, bishop takes, knight e4, we are threatening to open up, jumping away with a knight. So here, if white is taking on e4, we're going to grab with a queen. And on g7, taking on g7 is not really working because of knight c3, and we're going to win a queen. So in case of f3, which is a very solid move, trying to defend on e4, pretty calmly, modestly, we have d5 immediately breaking in the center and putting enormous pressure on e4. Bishop d3 makes a lot of sense. De. If pawn takes on e4, we have knight g4, very nice move, and knight is coming to e5, while the pawn on e4 is becoming an isolated one. If knight takes on e4, we take with a knight on e4, since we're not afraid, our bishop is defended, everything is good. F takes e4, and now rook b8. We're defending the bishop potentially, also bringing the rook to the file where b2 could be a weakness. We're slightly better. There should be some problem solved for white. We have bishop pair for both sides. Also e4 is the weakness, isolated pawn. In the next move, we're going to see maybe bishop c5 or bishop c5 or queen c5 coming, and it's going to be very difficult for white to finish the development. In case of queen e2 here, which makes the most logical sense to stop, like, to unpin basically, and also create some opportunities for a long castle, we are castling short. Now again, the threat of taking on c3 and taking on e4 is in the picture. e5, white is pushing forward. Knight d5, we're attacking also the knight on c3. In case knight takes, pawn takes, our bishop is defended on d4, but the pawn on e4 is getting more and more isolated. Basically, most likely white is going to castle alongside, and it's going to be easier to attack with our rook on the b file later on. e5 is going to be for sure a weakness, but in the worst case, we can always play d6 and trade it off for our doubled pawn. So bishop h4 is another move, not to move it back on the h6 c1 diagonal, but moving it back on h4 to keep more pressure on the queen, on the knight. So here the problem is that g5 is possible, but probably it's not too ambitious again. G5 can happen. Here knight g4, we're getting similar positions. Queen d4 again, bishop c3, take, castle, bishop b3, d5, bishop b4, takes, and h4. I don't really like the position because it looks like we're actually getting attacked here. So definitely a big compensation for white for the pawn. That's why we castle first, and then we are already threatening g5 and take on e4. So e5 is definitely a move which has to be considered. What happens if e5 played, because knight is under attack. And we have queen e7, typical reaction on these kind of moves. Now we're attacking the pawn on e5, we threaten to take it. Now white has to do something. In case of f4, there is a very nice move g5, which is breaking this pawn structure, attacking the bishop, attacking the pawn on f4, and basically the pawn structure in the center is falling apart. Since after bishop g3, we have knight e4, attacking both the c3 and g3, and, well, big problems for white. In case bishop takes on f6, we have g f6, queen g4, check, now king h8, queen h4, and white is trying to attack something. But the problem is that the only one queen is attacking. So after queen e5, check, king d1, we have queen d6, check, first of all, checking, defending the bishop, and after bishop d3, we have f5, and queen is perfectly placed on d6, defending h6 square, the bishop on b4, and yeah, position is just great for black. Even though the pawn can be taken on f5, we are still having great chances, great position with the bishop pair. Definitely. Okay, actually pawn on f5 cannot be taken, but if it's taken at any moment after king, let's say, moves away, it's not a problem anyway, because we are having much more active pieces, and our king is actually safer on the h file. Bishop d3, trying to defend on e5 early on. Now we're going for the d5 again. We're again breaking this e4. So in case of e takes d4 or d5, we have rook e8 check, king f1, and now bishop c3. It's kind of the easiest way, easiest approach. So bc, and now we take with the c pawn. We undoubled our pawns. The king is not castled. We are having better position, better development, better pawn structure, everything better. So we're better. In case of e5 here, then we go rook e8. Again, we're bringing the rook to X-ray the king. If queen e2 defends, then we have queen e7. The main idea is it's a trick, because it feels like knight can be taken, right? Because there is no rook on e8, but after pawn takes, we have queen d8, and the queen is going to fall. In case of h4 here, we have queen c5, removing the queen from this pressure on this diagonal, but putting enormous pressure on the knight on c3. So now there is actually not so easy to react here as white, because many moves are coming, and it's super difficult. Position is clearly better for black. Case of f4 here, which is also logical, defending the pawn on e5, we are having g5, instantly breaking the position of white, attacking the pawn on f4, attacking the pawn on e5 as well. So it's very tough for white to respond here, kind of a key move in this position. So bishop goes back to g3, trying to defend everything. Here we go, bishop g4, attacking the queen. Here bishop e2 is stopping the queen after d4, where we are attacking the knight. dc3 is going to come in a moment. Taking on f6 is not possible due to the issues on the e2 square. So white is on the verge of losing here. So castle is the best way, according to the computer. Engine is saying it's the best way. So here we take on c6, pawn takes, and d takes e4. So basically, we didn't have to play g5 here, and we took the pawn. Because the problem, of course, in case white is taking on e4, then we can trade the queens and play, in case white takes, we can trade the queens and play g5 and win something. Sorry, what was I just saying now? We can just take the bishop here. Okay. Sorry, yeah. Because there is bishop c, even there is no pin anymore, there is no sense in playing g5. Okay, so that was the in case of bishop c4, there is just queen e7. We have and white has a pair bishop, but this bishop probably is not so active on the king side, and bishop on c4 could be traded. Definitely not a compensation for the full pawn. And in case of bishop f6, we're just trading, and after queen c3, we have again an extra pawn. Okay, definitely it's not the best pawn in the world due to the pawn structure, but okay, we're just having an extra pawn. White will have to defend this endgame for sure. That was bishop g5. Bishop d3 is another option, defending the pawn on e5. Pretty decent move. So we have knight e4 here, bishop takes, and c5 attacking the bishop and also threatening some bishop c3 options. If bishop goes to e5, we have queen e7, our typical approach, putting this king on the x-ray. Bishop f4, and now we have c4. Very nice idea, because after bishop takes, which is the only way, we have queen e4, queen e2, trying to defend and pin at the same time, otherwise the material would be lost. We have castle, and we are reaching a very nice solid position for black. In case of bishop takes on f6, we take it with a queen d2, and now after bishop c3, we're managing to double the pawns for white. After castle, we play d6. Okay, there is a weakness on d6. We're ready to finish the development with bishop e6, bringing the rook to d8. But white is also having issues on the queen side. So we can say black doesn't really have issues. Maybe the only issue is the weakness on d6. And, well, white is also having some issues on the queen side around equal position. Bishop goes back to e3, also possible, and here we are ready to go with a d5. We are ready to bring the queen into the center. But let's say white is starting with e5. Very ambitious move, trying to attack our knight. Then we are jumping with knight to g4, attacking the bishop and the pawn on e5. Bishop f4, in case it depends the pawn, then we have d4 or c4. In case of d4, there is also bishop b5, king e7, castle. If we take a piece, then after queen e2, the position is a bit unclear and messy. And after a3, we're grabbing everything. Queen d4 takes, bishop d7, queen d7 around equal. Bishop d4, queen d4, sorry, takes, bishop e7, a5, b takes a5, rook a5, knight e5. The position is also around equal. So d4 is also, of course, possible, but there is another way, since after c4, after we play c4, there is no more this annoying bishop b5 check like in the other nine. So that's why we go for c4. And after bishop e2, which is targeting the knight on g4, we are having d4 move. So now there is no check anymore on b5. a3, targeting the bishop. We are taking on c3. Trade of the queen happens. Bishop is taken on b4. We take on b2. Remove the king away, a3. And here we are playing rook d8. Very nice move. Rook b1, and after knight b2, knight f2, sorry, we're sacrificing a piece, king f2, and playing c3. We sacrifice a piece for such a nice pawn structure. There is definitely a compensation for the piece in this endgame, and I would say it's even black who can try for a win in this position. Bishop takes g4. We are just castling because we still have a pin. And now rook is defending the queen on d8. So bishop d2, we're taking, grabbing the pawn. Bishop g4, trade happens. Now queen d5, attacking the pawn on e5 with a check. castle, and bishop goes all the way to a5. In the next move, we're going to grab a pawn on e5 with the check, and also c3 is going to hang most likely. So looks like we're going to win a pawn at the end of the line. Might have some advantage, so definitely ambitious line for black. That was bishop f4. In case of bishop b5, check immediately, which makes more sense. We play king f8, so it's also important. We have to move the king. The problem is that in case of bishop g4, the knight would hang, and queen g5, we're going to lose. So king f8 is... And here, white has a few options. First of all, we have a few threats which white has to react to. So we threaten to take on c6, play, on c3 at some moment, play d4, take on e3. Also, queen could come to a5, so many threats. So I start with bishop f4. First of all, after bishop f4, there is queen a5. It's a double attack, attacking the bishop, attacking the knight. It's tough to react on it. We're already slightly better. In case of bishop d2, then we go for d4. And after knight e4, trading on material, queen d2 and queen d5. We're putting pressure and attacking all the pieces, and we're winning back the e5 pawn. So actually we're not winning back, but we're winning the pawn. So this is a great position for black. In case of the castle, trying to keep material equality, white is going for it. We have knight e3, pawn takes, and after spoiling the pawns for white, we're going to play bishop e6. The main idea is that we don't need castle to finish the development. Our king can go to g8. Our rook can get out via the 6th rank. So this is kind of not a big deal for us. Meanwhile, we are enjoying the better pawn structure, which in long term could bring us an advantage. That was e5. So in case e pawn takes on d5, then we are castling, and because the d5 pawn is not running anywhere. In case of d6, we can play bishop e6, and the next move is threatened c4, because we cannot grab on d6 due to the bishop h7 issues. We have to always be careful about that. So castle, now c4, now bishop goes away, and now we grab the pawn on d6. In case of bishop c4, trying to defend and trying to hold up to the pawn. We're playing bishop g4. Now, queen g3, we would play a6. With the idea, of course, with the idea of b5, c4. And the problem now with a4, we have b5 anyway, since after ab, rook e8, rook e8, there is a queen a1. Very annoying threat from black. Sorry, and now castle. Yeah, castle makes the most sense, because now white is giving the pawn back, so not holding to the material. So bishop c3, doubling the pawn, c3 and c2. Now we take on d5, getting kind of a double-edged positions. We have, of course, white has bishop pair. In return, we have a better pawn structure. So it's kind of around balanced endgame for both sides chances. So that was a bishop d3 move. And in case of f3, which also makes some sense, defending the pawn pretty modestly. Now white wants to finish development with playing queen d2 and long castle. d5, it just looks like very tempting move, but unfortunately, it can be a bit too dangerous for black, because after queen d2, d, castle, e3, bishop b5, white finished the development, and we just took the pawn all the way to f3, and yeah, we were having for sure big issues in this endgame. So bishop c3, we go for it. We're not waiting for queen to d2, so the queen grabs on c3, we grab ourselves to double the pawns. Now the pawns are doubled. And here, after castle c4 makes a lot of sense. White is stopping ideas of the d5, but we're fine to play also with d6. Bishop e2, and now knight is going for the c5 square. There is no existence b pawn any longer. It cannot kick the knight. The knight goes to c5. We can push for the pawn break later. So castle, knight d4, bishop d4, and b6. We're ready to play knight c5, bring the bishop to b7, put the pawn on f6 so there is no issues on the g7 square. Put some pressure. I mean, potentially if white is going to play f4, we can create a huge pressure on e4. So far, the position is around equal, and the bishop pair advantage is not really feeling so much. The bishop on d4 is definitely a good piece. The bishop on e2 is not such a great piece. So we have a nice and double-edged position. So knight takes c6 is kind of a main move. And this position is the try to use the most out of this line that we spend so much time with the bishop coming to c5 and b4, the most critical approach for us. We're taking with a b pawn. Of course, we don't want to take with a d pawn. Don't want to trade the queens. And here there are a few moves. So again, white can start with bishop g5. But this is just going to transpose to the bishop g5 lines, which we already looked at. There is also e5 move. Well, e5 move is a little bit too early because after knight d5, bishop d2, stopping the pin, we have queen e7. And basically, e5 is super weak right now, and we have better development. After knight d5, pawn takes. Case of f4, we have rook b8. Also removing the rook from potential attack, defending the bishop on b4, and also putting pressure on b2 square. And we already have a good position. After bishop e2, we can take the bishop trade, and queen e5. We just took a pawn. We're just ready to castle, defend the pawn with the c6. For some reason, it showed that there is a compensation for white, but it's not really visible where is it. Because to me it looks like just an extra pawn for black. So bishop d3 is another option. So bishop d3 is, of course, logical developing move, also defending on the e4. It's pretty much the most common move. And of course, if white doesn't know what to do and how to play, white is going to react like this. So we have to know what to do. So the point here is, if we're going to play castle in this position or play d5, let me show you. Castle or d5 doesn't matter. We are most likely going to transpose to the main line of the Spanish variation with a bishop on b4. So not the bishop c5, bishop b4, but bishop b4 immediately. Since after takes, castle, bishop b5, and we're going to suddenly transpose at the same position where we didn't want to arrive to. So that's why, for this particular reason, we are not playing castle, but we're not playing d5, but we're playing d6. We're going for the d6. We are not allowing those ideas. And of course, the threat is, we introduce the threat still in the picture, in the position, with knight coming to g4. Let's look what happens in case of h3, stopping the knight g4 move. And we kind of can see that white spend the time. We spend the time with bishop coming from c5 to b4. White also spent in some way the time stopping our knight g4 idea due to the bishop on e3. Now we castle rook e8, putting pressure on e4, getting very good position. Queen f3, knight d7, now knight e5 is a threat. Queen moves away to g3, we take on c3, bc, and queen c6, putting pressure on the c3 pawn. There is a double pawn, and they're of course much weaker than our double pawn. The knight can jump, okay, not on c5, but rather on e5 at some moment. The position looks good. White has a bishop pair, that's true, but it's not much. I cannot really see much how white can activate it. Our queen is defending the king, is easily defending everything, so we have a good position here. In case of the castle, this was played in a few games. Here, the point that white is not afraid of knight g4, but we're going for it, knight g4. In case of bishop d2, which will most likely transpose to bishop f4 line, because after queen h4, bishop h4, queen f6 is just transposing. And after h3, knight e5, bishop h3 is already a huge threat. We have initiative in this position, and attack is just ongoing. Bishop f4 here, we're going for queen f6, targeting both c3 and bishop on f4. Okay, so bishop g3, we can play h5, immediately creating a threat of h4, and it's very, very unpleasant. So here, if knight is coming back to e2, defending the bishop, it's actually very bad, because after bishop c5, white is in a big trouble, because the problem is that b2 pawn is hanging, f2 is a big issue, and also g5 is coming to put even more pressure on f2. So queen d2 makes a lot of sense, defending both the knight on c3, the bishop on f4. Here we're going for castle. In case of a3, we're going with the bishop away, h3, and knight e5, getting the very nice square for the knight. At some moment, we are ready to take the bishop, but for now, knight is just great there. Next move, we're going to play bishop e6, rook e8, rook b8, bringing the rooks to the main semi-open files. Rook a to e1, bringing the rook, trying to defend everything. Here we go for knight e5, and after a3, moving the bishop away. Kind of messy and complex position here, but we are having good chances. Bishop e6 is going to be played next. Again, the bishop pair, but we also have a bishop pair, not much we should worry about. And again, pawn structure is slightly worse, but we have more initiative. We have more ideas in this position. For example, playing like bishop e6 or queen e6 with knight c4 idea. And at some moment, if we want, we can take on c3. White will be forced to take with a pawn, but for now we just keep two bishops on the board. And in case of bishop g5, well, it's kind of transposing to that line, but not really transposing. It's just transposing for one of the sidelines where we not play d5, because here we are we opted out for d6, and it's very important now. Since after bishop g5, we are going with h6, not castle. Again, castle could transpose to all this variation. We don't want it. We play h6, immediately asking question, where do you want to go? Trying to kick out the bishop. If bishop goes to h4, which makes a lot of sense, bishop e6, queen e2, castle, rook e8. If rook a goes to d1, we have bishop f5, using the fact of the pin, and the next move we're ready to go over with d5, targeting the e4 square. f3, d5, and we are creating a lot of pressure on white in this position. So we have indeed a counterplay. In case of knight a4, with ideas to kick the bishop out, and okay, just generally not to allow any bishop c3. We have g5, and after bishop g3, bishop f5, again putting pressure. After f3, bishop goes to g6. Again, we most likely will have some ideas of pushing d5, even though we have to be careful with the e5 ideas later in the position. Again, we are putting some pressure on e4, and the weakening move of g5 doesn't really feel like a weakening move, because we are fine on the king side. We are fine and defended. In case of queen f3, then we have g5. Bishop g has to go back to g3. Bishop g4. Basically, the only square on e3 is left for the queen, almost trapped. And here d5. So we force the queen to the same file with the rook, and now we're playing d5, targeting the pawn on e5, using the fact of this X-ray and pin on the queen. In case of f4, which might feel like a bit more ambitious, the thing is, this move, when you see such move, first of all, you think, oh, it's great center, e4 and f4 pawns. It's such a great move for white. So we definitely have to do something here. The main point in this line is that white king is not yet castled. So that's why we have to react fast and dynamic. And we go g5 immediately. Without this move, which is a key move in this position, without this move, this would be not good line at all. So that's why we go for g5. If fg happens, we go to g4, using the fact of the pin like in one of the previous lines. And now we threaten to take on g5. Let's say queen d2, trying to defend. Well, here we play bishop c5, introducing a threat of bishop e3, attacking the queen and attacking the pawn on g5, after which we would take on g5. So after knight d1, we have rook g1, and okay, h takes g5 is happening in the next move. The knight has a perfect square on e5. We have just a great position for black. Bishop goes back to g3, not taking. Now we are taking on f4. Bishop takes on f4, knight g4. Knight is ready to jump to e5. As we told, the e5 is a very good square for the knight, targeting all the pieces and securing the weakness on e4. Bishop goes back to h4 is another option, not taking on f4, but saying, all right, I still want to use the spin because there is no way for you to defend the knight on f6, which is a very strong move. Now we have to go rook g8. Our main idea is to kick this bishop away. We tried to kick, the bishop is still returning, so we have to try again. So bishop e2, stopping the rook g4 idea. Now we go rook g5, where we want to break the pin so badly that we sacrifice an exchange. The problem for white is that after taking an exchange, we're getting just positionally an amazing position. We're ready to put our bishop on the e3 square, our knight on e5, queen on f6. Our pieces are going to play very nice in this position, considering that the rooks don't even have the open files here. So that's why the bishop, the minor pieces, are more valuable in this particular positions. So white has to castle, white cannot really take. We play bishop c5, check. Now king h1, we go with the queen to b8, introducing the queen b2 threat and activating the queen via the queen side. And now we already threaten kind of to get rid of the pin because our queen is out. Position is very complicated, definitely, but we are very active as black, so we're definitely having chances. f4 was the move we looked at. So now we looked at the castle. So white is doing castle now. And the point now that if we're not reacting dynamically, again, the same position, then we're going to have the f4 on the board and white is going to have a great position. We have to react. We have to play g5. White castled, f4 is ready. We have to react g5. Bishop goes away. We're not allowing it. And h5. We are threatening h4, trapping the bishop. So white has to do something about it. Let's say h4. Well, in case of h4, I would like you to stop the video in this moment and try to find the best move for black. In case of h4, very interesting move. We have knight to g4, and the problem is that h4 square cannot be holden, like they cannot magically put the knight on f3 from c3. So after hg, queen g5, queen c1, queen d7, the problem is that h4, h3 is coming. The position of the king is getting collapsed, so we are winning here. f4 is a bit more dubious because now we can play bishop c5, introducing a check. Bishop goes to f2, we trade the pieces, and knight g4 comes with a tempo. Now we're ready to take on f4 and have a square on e5, so rook f3, and now we take. And if white wants to take, white is using one more tempo, and our knight is having a nice square on e5 meanwhile, so great position. Let's say rook f4. Queen h4 first, we're attacking the pawn on h2, and after h3, queen g3 is actually completely winning for black, because if white is taking g4, we're going to open up and bring the rook to the position. That was f4. So e5, it's a nice try from white, because white wants to open the center. Since we have a king in the center of the board, makes a lot of sense. But here we are playing knight g4 again. So main idea of this move is that if e d6 happen, we're having h4 intermezzo. dc7, attacking the queen. After queen d4, we're just going to win a piece. So that's why rook e1 has to be tried. Then we take on a g3. If queen comes to g4, we're taking on f4. Bishop, okay, the king is simply too exposed. We are just winning here. So rook e6 has to be tried. But here, after a few moves, like take on f2, again, king is getting out. Bishop d6, queen takes, some checks happen. It's pretty messy position. We're still up material here, and king is in the center for white as well. So definitely some chances for us due to being up material. And yeah, for sure, interesting position to try out and practice. Queen f3, another move for white. So idea is, of course, that c6 is also hanging here. h4, bishop f5. The idea is to threat on the knight on g4. And if white is, if we're trading, bishop takes, queen takes, then the queen is again attacking on the g4 square. Bishop c3, we're doubling up the pawns because after bc there is knight h6. That's why after bishop c3, queen g4 has to be played. We take on g3, pawn takes on c3, we grab a pawn on h2, grab a pawn on e5. Well, and we have again very interesting position where we are kind of attacking, but attack stopped a little bit because of the pawn on h2. We are having an extra 2 pawns in the position, but in return for that, we still have to castle or find the square. Probably we'll bring the king somewhere to g7, queen to f6, something like this. We're going to go for in this position and have some chances. Try to attack white anyway. A bishop b4 is another move, targeting the square on c6 in return. In case of d5, it is not going to be so great because after bishop goes to f3, the problem is that we're just slowing down since knight now is under attack and we cannot move it because the pawn is hanging on h5. So we must go for h4 immediately, allowing bishop c6 check, king goes away to f8. If bishop takes on a, this is actually pretty bad because after pawn takes on g3, bishop d5, we take on f2 with a check, and after rook takes f2, we play bishop c5, and actually we're winning now. In case of bishop f3 coming back and attacking, it's already kind of slightly better for white than the previous line. Then we take on g3, bishop takes our knight, we grab on f2, king h1, and now queen d7. Idea is that we bring the queen closer to the attack. So bishop f6, queen e6, and basically the position is again mess. If white is not taking on f2, then we can defend it with the bishop. And generally, even if white is taking, we have bishop c5 with the idea of rook takes h2, queen h6. We can give checkmate actually. It's in some crazy lines we're sacrificing a rook. So pretty messy position, but attack is an attack against the king. We are going to continue it. h3 is another way. Giving a square on h2 for the bishop looks logical. h2, bishop h2, bishop h4, bishop h2, sorry, and g4. We are continuing the attack. We're still dynamic here. In case of hg, we have knight g4, and well, the position is kind of collapsing. We're going to bring the queen to the game. There are going to be ideas of playing h3 or taking the bishops, or there are going to be many different nice ideas for black how to attack the white's king. So let's say e5. White is trying to open up the position in the center since our king is still in the center. We're trying to attack white's king. White is trying to attack black's king. We're going for d takes c5, bishop takes, and rook g8, trying to create a counterplay and attack on the g file. 1 second. Yes, that was it. So now we're going for the f3, which makes maybe more sense because now there is an extra square on f2 for the bishop in case we want to harass it with a pawn. So h4, bishop e1. Bishop e1 doesn't really make sense. It's not correct square for the bishop because bishop to bishop c5, king h1, we have knight h5, and many issues. Also knight g3 is a very nice threat. So bishop f2 makes the most sense. Now h3. The main idea is to attack the pawn on g2, which is defending this f3, and make f3 square weaker. So g3. Now we take on c3. Pawn takes on c3. Knight d7. We're aiming with the knight all the way to e5, targeting the bishop, targeting also the f3 square. Our idea is to play rook g8 and knight e5, queen f6 in the next moves, and we just want to attack the king. And yeah, it's tough to say how to proceed actually here for white, even though there is a bishop pair advantage in this position. It's very tough for white as well. So that was the f3 move. So now we're coming to the main line, which is actually the queen d4. This is the move which is a critical move for this variation, for the bishop c5, bishop b4 line. Attacking the bishop immediately from the d4 and offering or threatening to castle and finish the development immediately. So we have to continue, and queen a7, as we already discussed in this line, is very popular move. We're going it in many positions. Firstly, it's defending the bishop on b4. Secondly, it's attacking and putting more pressure on the pawn on e4. So it's a very good move for both of the reasons. So here in case of e5, well, it's not really bringing too much problems because here we can go c5. Knight e5 is also an idea, but it's not really a play for advantage. So c5 is actually a very good move. After e takes f6, cd, we're taking everything. We're taking on f3, very important. e3 is very important. Fe and c6, and basically we're definitely better in this endgame because we have a bishop pair advantage. We're ready to play d5, grab the pawn. We can grab the pawn like any move. We don't have to take it instantly, so we can play d5, grab the pawn. We have bishop pair, some weaknesses for white, so definitely great endgame to play, and at least slight advantage for black. So queen f4, queen is trying to remove it and also trying to remove the queen and also defend the pawn on e5, which is quite a challenge. Now we go for knight d5. Now we go for this move, attacking both the queen and the knight on the c3 square. So now there are again a few moves with the queen. In case of queen e4, which is trying to put pressure on our rook on a8, x-raying our rook. Then we play c6, and after bishop d2, trade on c3 happens, and after d5, which is very nice since en passant doesn't work because of the hanging queen. Queen goes away to f4, bishop goes back, and after queen a5, queen c7, we're just defending on c6, we're defending the bishop. We're just getting much better pawn structure. Our pawns are very strong. We're ready to finish the development, castle, play something like c4. And we're going to attack the pawn on e5, the pawn on c3. Great positions, clearly better advantage. So in case of queen f3, which is pretty bad, we again have c6 with similar ideas, and kind of everything is hanging here, even worse than queen e4. So queen g3, defending on e5 and attacking on g7 at the same time. Well, the thing is, for white, it was important to find some move which still holds the position and creates a counterplay. And here we have an interesting move where we are not really reacting to white. We're playing. Okay, let's first look what happens after knight c3 because it's interesting here. Queen g7 definitely has to be played, attacking the rook. Rook f8, removing it, a3, bishop a5, and bishop d2. The main idea is the bishop is not defended on a5, and that's why white is recapturing on c3 comfortably. Bishop b7 and queen f6, white is managing to equalize the position. But if we play bishop b7, because we are not afraid of queen g7, since after queen g7, we're just going to long castle. We're a long castle, and our next threat is, of course, taking on c3 or bringing the rook to g8 and so on. So yeah, definitely great idea. So if bishop d2 played instantly, without, of course, taking on d7, which would be awful for white, we have bishop c3, pawn takes. We're doubling the pawn structure on the queen side, and we play f6. Now we're ready to win the pawn in the next couple of moves because it's tough for white to defend it. And after that, we are ready to finish the development by bringing the king to the queen side. And there, of course, the bishop pair is there for white. But generally speaking, and about the pawn, regarding the pawn structure, and well, generally, the development is also better for black. That was e5. Now we're going into the f3 line. f3 is very solid, trying to defend, not pushing too much forward with the e5. So here we're ready to go with a d5 move. We're trying to use the fact that king is still in the center, we're still extraying it, it's still not possible to react as a way white wanted. Because, for example, after e5, we play knight d7, again putting pressure on e5. And let's not forget also bishop could be hanging at some lines. f4, defending the pawn. But here we just long castle or short castle. We are ready to break the center with f6. We are ready to play c5, knight b6, and we're just getting a very nice position here as black. So in case of long castle, then we short castle and we transpose to the ninth move, long castle. So it's not much new here. So a3 is another option. So white is attacking the bishop. We have to do something and remove the bishop all the way to d6. The idea is now from e5 to attack the queen on d4, also hit the knight on c3, and there could be also some attacks later as well on c3 square from the e5, from a different side of the board. So in case e takes d5, we're castling. The problem is that if we take on e5 on d5 immediately, then there is bishop b5 check. That's why we castle first, and then we're ready to take the pawn later in a couple of moves. So if white is greedy and taking the c6 pawn, well, we are going for bishop e5 as planned. If queen goes to d2, we have rook d8, we're harassing the queen. Bishop d3, rook b8, pointing out the weakness on b2. And for example, after long castle, we can go for knight d5. And already there are many, many problems in the position of white, and we are already winning because a huge threat of taking on c3 is very tough to meet as white. So queen comes to c5. Now, what should we do? Of course, coming back with d6, and after queen d4, we can repeat. Of course, we can repeat and immediately make a draw, but also we can play rook e8. If we don't want to repeat, we can play rook e8, and after king f2, we have bishop f5. King is in the center. We managed to keep the king in the center. We're ready to bring the other rook into the position. We're down the material, but there is a definite compensation here, full compensation for the two pawns, because the position of the white is much worse due to development and king's safety. That was an f3 option. In case of bishop d3, here white is saying, okay, maybe a castle short, maybe a castle long, depend what maybe black does. But black is going for a short castle. There is not much else left. There is no long castle in this position for black. So in case white short castling, we have knight g4 immediately targeting the bishop, also potential pawn on h2. And also the knight is ready to actually come at some moment to e5. So bishop d2 coming back, it's actually pretty bad because bishop c5, queen c4, and queen h4. And position is pretty much kaput and lost for white. If h3 targeting the knight on g4, then we're going for knight e3, queen e3, and queen c5. We're doing very well. We're targeting the bishop on the knight on c3. If white is trading the pieces, there is also the bishop pair advantage. Well, the position is just great. It's equal, but it's great for black. So a3 targeting the bishop. We have to do something with the bishop again, and we again move it away. In case we play c5, which could be interesting, then after queen c5, so all these trades happens, knight e4, taking a pawn, rook e8, long castle. White has the bishop pair, rook b8, rook h8, d5, giving back the pawn, checking the king, rook b1, bishop d5, rook takes. So some enormous, like crazy, not so crazy actually, but the the line of the computer, and after rook c8, we entered the endgame where everything is equal. But okay, it's this move c5 is, after a few moves, is going to create many traits. So let's keep the pieces played. Bishop d6. Here, in case of castle c5, now finally we play c5, queen a4, knight g4, and again we have similar idea. Now we managed to double the pawns on the e file, which is great, and we are having big chances now to win and convert this endgame. So if long castle, now we have bishop e5. If queen c5, we trade, and after d6, we have again knight g4 move, targeting the bishop. And it's also tough for white to react because white cannot move the bishop away since f2 is going to hang, and there is also h2 hanging, so black is already slightly better. So queen goes to c4. Now we have again knight g4. This knight g4 is always an issue. Queen c5 and now queen e8 moving away, again creating some threats for white. And if h3 here, trying to stop the g4 idea, which makes a lot of sense, then we are going bishop e5, attacking the queen. Now queen has to move. Queen a4, then rook b8, attacking the b2. After short castle, we're taking on b2, queen a5. And here, rook b6 is possible, but also rook b7 is possible. The position is pretty unclear. It's messy position, but yeah, definitely no problems for black. So in case of e5, so white is trying to push and kick the knight out, but still keeping the king in the center, which is of course a drawback. We go knight d5. We cannot really go c5 in the position because the big problem of c5 is that after taking everything, at the end of the line, the rook is going to hang on f8, so we cannot really go there. That's why after e5, we have to play knight d5. If castle happens, then generally, then we can already take the bishop, and we go into a position where we have a bishop pair advantage. If rook f e1, then d5, queen g3, bishop e6. Here we're just finishing the development. White is trying to put some pressure, but it's not really so easy. f4, c5, f5, we have c4. Counterattack on the bishop. If bishop moves away, then f5 is gone. In case of f6, then we play queen f8, very important move to defend the g7 square. And if f takes e, we grab the bishop, we trade the bishops, queen f7, queen takes on d3, and c6. Definitely there is a compensation because the pawn is also kind of weak, and we have a bishop which is stronger than the knight on c3. So fun position to play and try to dominate the light piece. Increase rook a to e1. Then white is already preparing this f4, f5, which is very annoying, and we have to, again, to react. So now we go for d5, king h1, removing from any particular ideas of bishop c5 and winning the queen. And bishop d7, we're just continuing our development. And after f4, of course, our bishop is developed on d7, not on a6, not to get attacked by f5. But here we have f6, because the pawn is currently pinned. The queen on e3 would hang, and we are perfectly attacking the pawn on e5. So here queen g3, f takes e5, f takes c5, and rook f8. For now, the position is kind of balanced. It's, I would say, more difficult to play as white. There is a bishop pair advantage in the position. The pawn on e5 is hanging, and I mean, not really hanging, but it's weakness. It's isolated pawn. It's fixed weakness. It cannot really march forward anytime soon, and we are ready to take it at some moment. Already there are threats in the position, which white has to handle, and it's not so easy. In case bishop goes to d2, first of all, removing the bishop, and secondly, just controlling the c3 square. And okay, there are already threats like taking on d4, d5. So here we play d6. Again, we're also threatening to take on e5, so white has to do something, castling long, just moving away. And it feels like, okay, the pawn is under attack, but actually tactically white is defending it. So here queen h4 is played targeting the h7 square. We play h6, rook e1, queen f6, queen e4. Now again attacking on h7 once again, like here g6, and then after a couple of trades, white is grabbing back the pawn. But here if queen d5 immediately is played, then there is rook b8, putting pressure on b2. Position is a bit shaky, I would say. But here after queen e7, queen f4, queen takes the pawn on c7. We have bishop g4. We have a double pawns on the d file. We have ideas against the king. We have ideas to attack on the queen side against the white's king. So position is, there's definitely a compensation for the material, but for the pawn structure in this particular case also. But we have an initiative, we have an attack, and I would say that king of white is weaker, much weaker than our king. And the one side who can try to start attack is definitely black. So that was basically the bishop d3 move, which looked logical. Okay, now let's start with the a3. So a3 move was not tried yet in the practice, but it's definitely possible. So if we take on c3, the problem is after queen takes, queen e4, bishop d3, queen goes back, long castle, castle, rook he1. The problem is that even though we won a pawn, we spend too much time coming forward, going backwards. Now white is ready to jump away with the bishop to create a discover attack on the queen. So black's position is very critical. Like it's not so good. So so bishop a5. Bishop f5 is much better, not to take on c3. Now in case of long castle, we have short castle, and basically this is the main line, but with the a3 and bishop a5 included, which doesn't change that much. So e5, targeting our knight, bishop takes on c3, queen takes, and knight d5, attacking the queen. Queen c5, we're taking the pawn. Okay, again, we took a pawn. We are ready to play something like rook b8, attacking the pawn on b2, creating some pressure, but also there is a bishop d4 and so on in the position. We have to be really careful. In case of queen d4, then we grab the bishop, queen takes, and we are putting pressure against the e5 pawn. f4, we have d5. Of course, always makes sense when the queen is hanging on e3 to use the fact that en passant is not possible and push forward with d5. So the similar position which we're having in the main line, but with a pawn on a2, and it's not clear if it doesn't really make so much difference. And the similar plans are also in the position. So e5 is another way. The move ago, then it was pretty bad for white because there was c5. Now c5 is not possible because the bishop on from before is not defending it any longer. So here we have to go knight d5, again targeting both knight and the bishop. Now bishop d2 goes back, knight c3, we're trading, and now c5 intermediate. So finally we found a way to include the c5 move. So queen goes to e3, bishop c3, queen c3, and now d5 again. Now we're using the fact that, of course, pawn is pinned, so there is no en passant possible, and d5 again, we're getting this very nice pawns in the center, d5 and c5, very good position. In case of long castle, we have c6, just defending everything. Great pawns we have, even though they are doubled. And again, we are ready to finish our development with castle, bring the bishop. And at some moment, we can try to create an attack on the queen side. So what happens if bishop b5 check is being included? Then, of course, we have to move with the king away. That's the big problem here with the line, because bishop d7 would not really work due to all the weaknesses and the weakness on c5 and d5. So it's not really working. So king f8 has to be played. And if white is going for a long castle, then we go d4. Okay, so queen a5, targeting some pawns we have h5, and the main idea is that king actually doesn't have to castle, because here we have rook a6 and bringing the rook all the way to b6. We can bring the rooks on the b file and create pressure against the b2 pawn. Yeah, but black's position is pretty much fine. Now, in case of castle here, we have to be pretty precise, because we have some problems, of course, with the king. We didn't castle, so rook is on h8. So here we go, rook b8 first. Our idea is, okay, we're attacking, we're targeting the bishop, also putting pressure on b2 at some moment, and not allowing any of the bishop a c6 moves. So bishop g3, bishop goes back, c4 now. Now bishop goes all the way to e2, where we use it for tempo, and we played c5. Very nicely, we used the tempo on the bishop, and now we have a nice position. So b3, we basically now if white is not doing anything, we're in time to play bishop e6, and well, g6, putting the king to g7, and have great position. But here white goes for b3. We take on b3, pawn takes, d4, attacking the queen, and here queen a5, there is g6, and we're just bringing the king to g7 and bringing the rook out from the h8 finally. What happens in case of a4, which is holding the bishop on b5? Well, then we have a6, attacking it. Bishop goes to e2 without coming to d3 without this c4 tempo. Then we go for d4, attacking the queen. At the same time, also we are attacking on pawn on e4, and the pawn on b2 is also under pressure. So we're going to win one of the pawns. We're going to play g6, bring king to g7, bring rook out to the e file. And okay, bishop most likely will go to b7, or it will go out to e6. We will see. The position is good. There is a definite initiative for black. So that was an a3 move. And now we're coming to the main line where white is castling long. White is not challenging the bishop, castling long, and the bishop is staying on b4. So the thing here is that we have to finish our development and castle. Because in this position, if we go for bishop c3, if we're going to take queen c3 and we're going to hunt the pawn on e4 with queen e4, the problem is after bishop d3, our position is pretty much over. And the game is over, and we should resign here. Looking at the king, which is still in the center, queen has to move somewhere, and brilliant pieces of white. So that's why we got to finish our development. We shouldn't rush and go into the lines trying to win material. We have to evaluate everything. If we win material, we also shouldn't lose positionally, or should not try not to lose. So a3, kicking the bishop from a4. Now if bishop takes c3, queen c3, knight e4, queen a4, queen a5, sorry, d5, there is a bishop d3 move. Again, there is more initiative for white. The bishop pair is looking at the king side. Yeah, definitely. There is definitely a compensation for the pawn. So c5, we must include this move targeting the queen, which is of course important since the bishop is on b4. Now queen d3, we take on c3 now, because now after queen takes, we can take on e4. It's already a different story with inclusion of c5. Since after queen a5, we have d6 move, and bishop d3, we're going to reply with knight f6. And now the tables turn, and we are actually the ones who are having a better position because of the better pawn structure than in the previous line. And here we're already ready to play, for example, bishop b7, or develop the bishop to e6, bring the rooks to the b file, putting pressure on the b7 square, and the pawns are protecting each other perfectly. And we're up a pawn, by the way. That was a3 move. In case of f3, then we go with the immediate d5. We are again highlighting that the bishop on e3 is there, and that's why this move is actually possible. If pawn takes on d5, then we're grabbing the knight first. After queen c3, we have knight d5, and goodbye bishop on a3, and in case of bishop coming to g5, putting more pressure and creating the spin, we have bishop c5 attacking the queen. Queen has to move, or if the queen is not moving, bishop f6 is the only way. Then we take with g pawn, of course, the only way since our bishop is hanging on c5 if we take with a queen. Queen goes to d2, and now rook b8 is a move, trying to create an attack. In the next moves, we are ready to bring the queen to e5. There could be ideas of playing queen a6, queen a3 as well, even if not queen a5, but now queen a3 is also a threat. So definitely a lot of ideas currently for black on the queen side, and we are continuing the attack, which is not easy to face for white. So bishop g5, trying to pin and put a lot of pressure without playing these f3 moves. And this position was played in a couple of games. Actually two grandmasters in this position continued with a bishop g5. But here I play rook e8. So we stop the e5 idea and also attack on e4 at the same time. So in case of bishop c4, which looks logical developing move, we take on c3, queen takes, and now knight e4 is possible. So after bishop e7, knight c3, rook d1, we have d5 move, attacking the bishop, and we're equalizing here. We're having a round equal position. Again, white is definitely having some compensation due to the piece activity for the pawn, but we're having an extra pawn. So f3, trying to defend. Here I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. I hope you found it. It's probably not so difficult, but yeah, bishop c3 is the best move. In case pawn takes on c3, then there is queen a3, and okay, white is in a huge trouble. King d2, we have c5. Queen f2, we have rook e6, and position of white is just collapsing. If queen takes on c3, then we have knight e4, intermediate attack. Since the bishop is not defended on g5, we can do it. Bishop e7, knight c3, and we're just going to be up a pawn in the endgame. So in case bishop takes f6, which has to be played, other than that, this bishop c3 and knight takes on e4 is a problem, then white has to take on f6, and in both games, this move was played. The problem is we cannot, of course, capture with the queen. We would love to, we cannot. We have to capture with the pawn because we have to defend our bishop on b4. In case of rook d3, bringing the rook all the way to the third rank to attack our king, we can go bishop d6, stopping this idea of rook g3, and also at the same time opening the ideas of attack on the b file. And after rook e2, rook b8, well, we have a position where white is going to attack on the king side, we will attack on the queen side, and we will see who is going to succeed. So bishop c4 is another move, developing the piece, also putting some potentially pressure against our king. So here we go for queen c5. If we go rook b8, then queen a7 is going to be pretty bad for black. So that's why queen c5 we must play. In case trade happens, then we already had similar positions already many times, similar endgames. It's around equal position. Again, both sides can try to play this for a win later, but around equal. So queen goes back to d3, not trading the queens. Then we have rook b8, and in case queen g3 with a check, we're having queen g5. And now we're trading the queens, and well, again, we're getting into this equalish endgame. In case of h4 here, we have queen e5, which is stopping the idea of queen g3, since now queen g4 is not possible due to the h4 move. And we also threaten to take on c3. The great position, and well, also potentially we can still attack on the b file. That was the bishop g5 line. So now we go to the main line, which is e5, which is immediately striking and attacking the knight. We have to include the bishop c3 move first because we need the d5 square for the knight. We cannot allow the knight to be taken. So queen c3 and now knight d5, attacking the queen and the bishop. In case of rook takes d5, which is interesting try, after c d5, queen c7, rook e8, there is a good compensation for an exchange, but definitely it's not try for a win. In case of queen d4, then we're going for knight e3, we're grabbing the bishop, and after queen e3, rook e8, targeting the e5 square. And again, if there is... Okay, let's start with move rook e1, then we go to f4. In case of rook e1, it looks pretty weird. Here we can immediately go with the d5. And the point is that after e takes d, we have queen e3, rook e3, trade happens, and we take on d6. We managed to undouble our pawns. The e3 could be a weakness. And again, we have round equal endgame where everyone has chance, and draw has also its chance as well. So f4, in case f4 happened, again, we have the similar idea like before. If we play d6 here, then there is bishop e2, and after take, bishop f3, putting pressure on c6, and now it's actually white who's better. That's why we have to play d5. We have to play dynamically, using the fact that white cannot capture on Poisson in this case. And after bishop d3, we have f6. So we want to attack the pawn on d5, but first we have to start with d5 and then f6, so that we create this very nice pawn structure. In case of rook d coming to e1, trying to defend the pawn, then we are capturing. White is also capturing. We're having rook b8 idea. In case of queen a7, there is bishop e6. And in case of rook h2 f1, then there is c5. In case of bishop e6 here, which is also possible, then rook hf1, then we can go either rook f8, because after trade of the rook queen a7, there is c5 move, trying to block the queen out, and there is definitely a compensation for the pawn, considering the fact that pawn on a5 is also a weakness, and our rook is also great on f-file, going maybe at some moment to some f2 square. And in case of course, also possible to play c5 here, not allowing the take on a7, not allowing that compensation. So rook h2 e1 is also possible. And white is basically just defending on e5. We're taking, in case pawn takes, and we have bishop e6. Basically, next move we are ready to play c5, rook b8, putting pressure on the b2 pawn. And in case of queen takes, we trade the queens. If rook e5, we're just trading everything. Bishop e6, again getting into this similar equal position. But okay, equal again, it's not equal, does not equal draw. Definitely, if we win the pawn, let's say on e5, we will have chances to win. We can try to put more pressure on white. And in case pawn takes, then again, if we play bishop e6 and bishop e6 and bishop a6 could be very unpleasant, with the rook e3 following up. So that's why we have to include a very nice move, a5, stopping the ideas of bishop a6. In the next move, we're ready to play bishop e6, defending the pawn on d5. We are ready to go for the c5, c6, making a beautiful pawn structure in the center. And, well, we can later try to attack the pawn on e5. Again, the equal endgame doesn't mean that it's going to be a draw. Someone can make a mistake. And yeah, the most important just to play correct moves. And if it's going to be a draw, well, that's kind of it. That's chess. It's better to play a draw than, make a big mistake and lose. So that was all about the 4 knights, the squash game. I hope you enjoyed. And now we're coming to the next stage where we're going to look at the most important positions, most important ideas, the key ideas from this chapter. We're starting from this position where bishop g5 was played. It is a bit sideline here with knight on f5, but it's of course important to remember that when the knight is on f5, it's even bringing more power to d5 move, so we don't even have to worry about that it's even attacked 3 times. It's attacked 3 times, but it doesn't matter because the knight on f5 is hanging. So that's kind of everything is working out here. All the lines are working out. We already discussed there are many lines here, but d5 is working out perfectly in this position. So next one is after bishop coming to d3, defending the pawn. Well, here the point is that we could continue in the normal way, playing playing like a castle long, castle short, and so on. But we are including this a5 topical move. The main idea is that we create a threat of a4, and if white is stopping it, like playing a3 or a4, is going to create some problems. For example, a4 is going to weaken the b4 square, and a3 is going to stop ideas later in the line with bishop coming to a3. So it's going to be actually bad that the pawn is on a3. So that's a good move to include. And of course, if white is not reacting, then we're going to march forward with a4 and get more space on the queen side. The next position is white when white is playing rook e1 here. So white is defending the pawn and ready to go forward with the e5 move. We already castled, we have a rook on e8. And here again, rook on e1 does also contribute to us playing d5, and d5 again is working out here because after take we can take on e1, and all the straight, after all the straight happens, we get a good position. So d5 is working out again. That's why again, when we have an opportunity to go for d5, we have to seriously consider it, and this is one of the cases where we do have it, and we have to consider and we have to play it. The next position is happening after king went away from g1 to h1, and it's kind of already a sign for us. Since king moved from g1 to h1, king is getting removed from this diagonal, so f4 is a big threat now to establish very nice position of the pawns in the center with f4 and e4. So we have to do something about it, and we must play g5. Because if we play something like d6, then after f4, we're going to have big troubles. So that's why we have to play g5 here, kicking the bishop, and at the same time stopping the f4 plan. The next position is after bishop went to d3 in this variation, where knight took on c6. So here, the point is if that we're going to go for the d5, or if we're going to go for the castle, so let's say d5, after take, castle, we would transpose the bishop b4, the Spanish variation of the four knights, and bishop g5 line. We're going to enter there. We don't want to enter there. That's why it's very important for us in this position not to march for it, because it's actually possible to go for d5, but those lines are pretty like equalish and drawish and dry to play. So that's why I recommend you to play d6 rather, introducing a threat of knight g4, and not to allow all these exchanges early on with the d5, but rather to have this endgame where we can put pressure on the e4 pawn later. So that's one more. Yeah, so this position, and there are many positions similar to this one, where we have a piece on the e file. In this case, there's a queen, which is not defended or not defended with enough time, where we have a chance to attack it with d6, or where we have a chance to attack it with f6. Okay, f6 is bad because it's opening up the diagonal against the king. And if we're going to go for d6 immediately, then we might have issues on with c6. So we go first with d5, establishing a nice pawn structure, and next move is going to be f6, targeting the pawn. So this is a very nice idea, using the fact that en passant is not really possible in this case. And okay, later in the game we can play c5, c6. Okay, first bishop e6, c5, c6. But first, we're bringing the pawn to f6, targeting the pawn on e5, and trying to explode the center for white. That was it for today for the chapter 4 Knights Scotch game. I hope you enjoyed and it was useful for you, and I'm going to see you in the next chapter. See you. Bye-bye.